I used to never play. Good evening and welcome to the Tempe City Council Work Study Session for September 18th, 2017, here in the Harry E. Mitchell Government Center. First item on our work study session is a call to the audience. And also on the work study session as well. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address us on the items listed on this agenda and from the committee of the whole as well as the issue review session? Could you please get my attention? I do have one card. Karen Contos, regarding urban forestry. Please state your name and place of residence for the record.
I'm Karen Contos, and I'm here on behalf of the Arizona Sustainability Alliance, and our address is 8205 South Priest. Our mission is to create and support cutting-edge, project-based sustainable solutions in Arizona. And I'm here today because the big group of us, we support the Urban Forestry Master Plan that is being discussed today, especially the addition of the urban forester position and any other funding required to implement that plan. There are many benefits to increasing the tree canopy, such as beautification, providing shade for a walkable city, increasing air quality, and reducing average temperatures. Our team of volunteers is looking forward to partnering with the City of Tempe, with other nonprofits, as well as residents to help grow Tempe's urban forest. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the only card I have. Is anyone else in the audience wishing to address us on any of the items on the issue review session or the committee of the whole items? Could you please get my attention? Seeing none, I'll close that portion of our meeting and go right to the issue review session, the small area transportation study and development fee land use assumptions. Mr. Bessler, Shelley, we got everybody here.
It's a group effort.
Good evening, Mayor, members of Council. I'm Don Bessler, Director of Public Works. I'm accompanied by Shelley Seiler, our Deputy Director of Public Works for Transportation, and Don Cartier from CivTech and John Creer from ASU. We're here to give you our second update on the small area transportation study and development fee land use assumptions. If you recall that we last spoke to you about this in February of this calendar year, and we gave you an update on where we were headed with the joint effort. I'm going to make my comments brief, but essentially to remind the council and the viewing audience what this is a study that the city commissioned in partnership with ASU in order to look at our core area, our Lake District, our downtown area, the emerging Novus Innovation Corridor, and really think about the effect to our transportation grid on development with an eye towards all forms of transportation solutions, multimodal from the pedestrian up to the vehicle, where typically our transportation studies focus primarily on vehicles. Probably the biggest takeaway at the policy level for council is this is a smart growth tool. This allows council to think generationally over the next many years, as long as we keep this model updated, about the effect of any proposal that you may be considering for infill development in your core area. And we're very excited about that because, as I said, it takes you to a very granular level about what those impacts look like, but it also gives you an opportunity to think generationally. Things like Tempe Town Lake, things like the light rail, things like our local circular orbit. Those are generational decisions that were made by previous individuals that sat in this very chamber and really thought long and hard about what would this community look like 5, 10, 15, 30 years from now if we make these investments. This is a tool that will allow you to do that, and we're very happy to present it to you tonight. I know John wanted to make a couple of remarks as well.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and Council, this has been a great effort between ASU and the city, and for a couple of reasons. One, as you know, Novus Innovation Corridor is coming, and it's going to come with its impacts. And this was an opportunity to kind of look beyond any one project. And I know Don and Shelley will describe the entire area that we studied. But again, You know, the way I look at it is we're all building our 100-year neighborhood. We got to live with what's left behind. And this was an opportunity to kind of look holistically at everything, how it's all going to work. Also to think creatively about what types of things can we apply together as two entities that will be here for the next 100 years and be able to live with what we've all decided. But again, we had several charrettes at an architect's office and went through scenario planning, and we looked at a lot of different options. The things that we've come up with are practical, doable. Some of them are very big ideas that we need to come together and do some long-term planning with. But again, ASU is 100% committed to not only helping develop the area overall, but helping participate in this type of planning on many of these types of issues that sort of enhance the quality of life, but get us all where we want to go. But I think this has been a great result. Good team, by the way.
All right. So with increased development, we recognize the need to take a look at the transportation system more holistically, as John indicated, taking into account the multimodal strategies in the general plan as well as the transportation master plan. And ASU and Tempe partnered together and brought on board CivTech to help us with that. We concurrently were also looking with a small area transportation study at an update or phase 2 to our development fee study. So the small area transportation study contributes to 2 council priorities. Priority 1, safe and secure communities, and the performance measure of achieving a reduction in the number of fatal and serious injury crashes to 0, also known as Vision 0, as well as priority 3, quality of life, by achieving a 5% decrease in vehicular delays during rush hour periods along arterial corridors compared to previous periods. So as a reminder of what development fees are, they are one-time fees charged to developments to construct new infrastructure to accommodate the demands put on the system by growth. Development fees are a forward-looking tool that enables the city to collect revenue from development in order to have growth pay its fair share. It's not a tool, though, to address system shortcomings that already exist. So historically, the city has charged development fees for water and wastewater infrastructure, and only recently in 2016 did we implement development fees for other general governmental areas like police, fire, transportation, and parks. So phase 2 of the development fee study will be focused only on updating the water and wastewater, which by state statute requires an update every 5 years, and then the transportation fees to coincide with this study. The development fee study requires 3 distinct steps. One is land use assumptions. The second is a 10-year infrastructure improvement plan, which the ideas we're presenting to you tonight will be incorporated into, and then fee calculation. So we're currently only in step 1, looking at the land use assumptions and projecting population, jobs, and housing units for the next 10 years. This fee study further separates out growth and transportation into the north and south service areas. So previously, we only had one service area, and now with the update in the model that CivTech has created for us, we're able to separate the model or the fee area and service area into 2, north and south. This page this slide has a number of a lot of numbers on it, and really what your takeaway should be is that we can see citywide the growth in population is about 15%, whereas in the northern portion of the city it's at 29%. And likewise, 10-year job growth citywide is at 14%, but in the northern portion of the city it's 23%, which is to be expected. So the city has approved developments that will contribute to increased density in the downtown. ASU is planning for the Novus Innovation Corridor, as John indicated, and we're also seeing lakefront development increasing and adding pressure on the system. We also know that off-campus student housing is changing, and we need to really look at the interaction between vehicles and pedestrians around the northern portion of the city. So what we did was we looked at and created a big idea analysis, identifying areas needing improvements, large-scale efforts to improve the system, and we, from that, developed a quantitative and qualitative analysis that you'll see, we'll discuss a little bit later, on how we analyze these different big ideas. But we also looked at the interrelationship between some of them, because we know the system benefits will be greater when some are implemented together. So as John discussed, we had some charrettes and the group got together to identify a big idea project list. ASU Tempe representatives from Catellus were all met to brainstorm. And this list provides the results of that brainstorming session. So now to go into the big idea. So the first is a University Drive road calming. And really what that looks to do is maintain the current vehicle capacity, but increasing safety for pedestrians. And so we're currently working with ASU on a project that would add median islands to University Drive between College Avenue and Veterans Way. We also know that the window of opportunity is increased by the fact that ASU owns both north and south of University.
You're not, just point of clarification, you're not taking out a lane of traffic, are you?
We are not.
But you can't even, I mean, you talk about traffic calming, you can't even move
Fair
now.
question.
No, but you can't even move now.
So yeah, the
I mean, I'm just,
islands would be in the median area, and we're working with ASU to identify if they would be willing to eliminate some of the turns to extend those median islands to have the greatest level of impact. So that's currently underway, and the project is funded in this fiscal year's CIP.
Councilman Granville?
Yeah, I just want to say, I was surprised. Can you go back to the previous big idea? I was surprised to see that listed here, and I was happy to see that it scored relatively low. Because honestly, the traffic on University, you couldn't hurt anyone anyway. Like, the traffic has got to be like 15 to 25 miles an hour most of the day until you get to 6 or 7 o'clock. I think the question is how, like, if there's some spot, it seems like, that's the right speed, right? Where you've got the right speed and the right whatever. And the thing that slows down University, one is the number of lanes of traffic, the number of people. But number two, it's the number of pedestrians trying to get across the street. Every time a light changes, nobody turns left, nobody turns right, because it's just your light is used up by pedestrians, which is cool. But I think I was happy to see the other one here about more pedestrian bridges, because that to me is the solution to both the slow speed on University and also the pedestrian safety on University.
Which is why you see some of the designs with the above, like at Rural and Elliott.
Right.
I mean, Rural and University. That's
I
one of
think
the.
that makes a ton more sense.
And I talked with John and Dr. Crow about this as well. It's the pedestrians, we got to figure out a way to move them.
Yeah, whether that's
As
above
opposed
or
to-
below, but
yeah.
at street level is not working right now. Anyway, I was glad to see this one didn't score that well, I gotta be honest.
And we're off.
Yeah.
The second big idea we looked at is a separation of the light rail where it crosses University, which happens just west of Rural Road. And this area is something that we had talked a lot about in the design charrette, opportunities to do so. Of course, it's more regional in nature and that it would require participation of several entities to make it happen, including Valley Metro. But what this would alleviate today, the light rail crosses, and every time the light rail crosses, that whole intersection of University and Rural comes to a complete stop. And to the earlier point of pedestrians, there are a lot of pedestrians crossing there. So between the pedestrians crossing on that next green, it's several cycles of lights before everything returns to normal. And there's starting to be a backup of cars past the light rail
All the way
line.
to Rural.
No, Clintock.
I mean, yeah, sorry, yeah.
Yeah. Lauren?
Rural.
So this is one of the best ideas, I think, that's come out of the study, but obviously it's one that might suck all the oxygen out of the room because it could potentially be quite costly. And I know you're not necessarily looking at that as the prime variable, but that is a concern that the cost might be.
So what we would be doing with this option is queuing it up in the regional transportation plan, and then, and as well as putting it in the transportation improvement program through MAG, which would allow us to seek grant opportunities for funding, because we recognize this is a very high cost item.
But more importantly to that, I think as we all work to invite more folks here to work and live and play, just being able to articulate a common vision, whether it's funded or not, here's where we're headed, and these are the kinds of things we want to do to achieve that, I think helps people realize that, okay, you've got your act together, you recognize these issues, and you're all headed in this direction and trying to pull in the same direction. So as Shelley mentioned, just be prepared for opportunities. Because again, this isn't the most expensive one. We've got others.
Mayor, just to sort of buttress up Don and Shelley's comments and John's, the idea in this exercise and putting things into the model, again, is to think generationally and long-term. You know, when somebody talked about Tempe Town Lake back in the day, I'm sure that that was an oxygen sucker too, that you just can't imagine getting to that place. But I think, so what we did in this effort was to put all the ideas that came forward out of that effort, and some of them were really probably bad ideas, not just because they cost a lot, but they just did other things that achieved unintended consequences. But we went ahead and did that, and as they get further, you'll see that they didn't rank very high. But we didn't want to just reject them out of hands. I think it was a very honest effort. But I must say too, because we're so, Tempe is well understood as being public process oriented. This is not a public process effort at this point. Any one of these projects, as they advance, would go through a very, very robust public process effort on its own. This is just a planning tool at this point.
David?
Thank you, Mayor, and Dawn, not Dawn, and Shelley.
Thank you.
I'm sure you've thought about this and talked to Mission Valley Metro about this. How long would this one shut down the light rail?
That's a good question. We have not talked about that at this point. My assumption is that it would be for a pretty significant amount of time. I'm guessing at least a
Or
year.
maybe it wouldn't. Maybe it would be a shoe fly around it. I mean, those things haven't been thought out yet at all.
That's an engineering and design issue on how you would construct.
It's a-
Yeah, but well, it's way more than an engineering and design issue because the impact it has on people that count on
For
the
sure.
light rail. So I
It's
understand
an
the question
engineering
can't
and
be.
design, whether it shuts down.
Yeah, I understand the question can't be answered until you do engineering and design, but the point is, that's going to cost money, engineering and design. Prior to doing engineering and design, you have to decide whether you want to do it or not.
Right.
For me, whether or not the light rail shuts down and for how long would be a consideration as to whether or not to do it. So it might be a chicken and egg kind of thing, but I would want to have a really good estimate of how long it shuts down for before we make a decision
Absolutely.
to spend money on doing this.
And depending on how much land you have, you could build your separation off alignment and create a small connection on each side. So you would still be shut down during the times of making those connections and reconnections, but potential to stay open all the rest of the time. It's really a land question and how that happens.
And that's why I worry about, Mayor, because if you're rerouting a road, it's easy to say, okay, follow this dirt path over here, or use the median. But for a light rail, you have to put tracks in the ground or something. You have to have tracks. So I know that that's a lot more difficult, and you have to have land that you can put tracks in temporarily, or can you use the existing and put the bridge in a different place than where the existing is? Whatever it is, I'd like to know there's some period during which I assume that it will be disrupted. Is it a day, a week, a month, a year, 2 years? That would be something good to know before we decide to spend money on it.
All right, so on to big idea 3, which is closing University Drive. What we know with this idea is that we would be increasing safety for pedestrians and bicyclists, because we know the movement across university for ASU students is important to the system. However, looking at the drawbacks, we know that increased congestion would likely result, or would result east and west of the closures, and that there would likely be a neighborhood impact because people would probably choose to cut through the neighborhood, specifically Maple Ash. Again, this is the window of opportunity really is based on the limits of the closure, but for the major portions of it, ASU does own that property.
Not the street.
Correct.
I just, for the record, I would be opposed to closing university.
And you'll see that this one actually does not rise to the recommended solution set.
Yeah, it wouldn't be good for traffic.
Question about that. Yeah, as I recall, this was actually, when I was in, I'm going to go back now, 95, I think this was talked about. 95, 96, I remember there were a couple of meetings about it, and it did not go well then either. So, the more things change, I guess. I'm not sure how that affects traffic in Maple Ash, since it's all east-west traffic, but yeah, I agree. I mean,
Because, excuse me, Mr.
yeah,
Mayor,
how does it?
people would cut through Maple Ash to get to a different part of campus and would try and get to campus in a different kind of triangulated way. So they would cut through the neighborhood so they could go to a different part of campus.
The interesting thing in this study was that
But
we
they go on
learned,
9th Street, they would cut it through and go in around the core building, and they would just, try and navigate through ASU that way, through the west and the east.
Okay. Yeah,
I was going to say, the interesting thing about this study was we learned more of the true nature of the university, which was the majority of it was commuter pass-through, and the minority was local. So if some of the bigger ideas eventually emerge where regional pass-through traffic can go different routes, then all of a sudden university takes on a different complexion down the road.
So big idea 4 is widening the Rural Road Bridge. The Rural Road Bridge is projected to hit a capacity. We were really looking at 2040 future year for this, but with all of the entitlement density plus the projections, we looked at widening Rural Road Bridge by 1 lane in each direction. So that would take on an 8-lane cross-section. I think the things that we really learned about this one is it is able to be implemented with the current bridge in place and done half at a time. It will keep traffic, though. This particular option would keep traffic located on rural where it is today and Rio Salado. So that it would keep that existing traffic pattern similar. It would just provide more capacity to handle that future traffic.
Lauren?
But you could also say you're just increasing vehicular capacity there, and then you're just sort of adding, induced demand, just adding to the problem of funneling more traffic into the city through Rural Road. So, I mean, it could have its drawbacks.
That is true. I think that oftentimes the whole idea of vehicles and pedestrians don't correlate. And so one of the drawbacks of this is, as much as we're seeing the pedestrian connectivity pick up, especially with Novus on both sides of the street, an option like this would increase that pedestrian crossing time getting across the road. Mm-hmm. So there's the plus and negatives of all of these. And sometimes it's pedestrian plus and sometimes it's vehicle plus.
All right, so big idea 5 is rural Rio intersection improvements, and what this would do is currently today northbound and southbound only have single lefts, and we would add dual lefts to the northbound southbound movements as well as right turn lanes. And we know that this intersection continues to be a challenge for us, and so that would allow us to increase vehicle capacity. However, the drawback is anytime you widen an intersection, the crossing time for pedestrians does increase.
Big idea 6 is the Dorsey Lane connection, and this connection is currently being shown as part of the Novus project. This would extend Dorsey Lane from University heading north across Rio Salado and connecting into that existing traffic signal that's a part of the mall. And so this one would have a lovely benefit of reducing some of the north-south traffic that's currently on Rural Road. It just gives some drivers an opportunity to head somewhere different with less congestion. So we did see a reduction in volume on rural when we implemented the Dorsey Lane connection.
Wait, can I go back one slide? On the Rio Salado, you're proposing putting a right turn lane going west from McClintock onto rural? Because there's one now, but for some reason this morning it was blocked off.
Oh.
I mean, is that what you're saying? Are you also?
Was it blocked from construction?
Yeah, but there was no activity.
It's just plated.
Okay, we'll look into that.
But my question is, even if you leave out of Marina Heights to go east on Rio Salado, you're saying you're going to add a right turn lane going east, and then you're also going to add a right turn lane going west on Rio Salado if you needed to go north on rural, or if you needed to go south on rural.
So we would look at
And then you would look at dual lanes. You mean like the arrow?
dual lefts.
Dual lefts.
Yes. So north-south
That would be
currently only has
helpful.
a single left.
Yeah, dual
and
lefts would be.
so we could increase our ability to move that traffic, and we know that much of that is going into the Marina Heights area. All right.
Sorry.
So big idea 7 is adding eastbound 202 ramps at McClintock. So currently today we only have the west side of the interchange, and this would add ramps to the east side. Obviously this is a very big idea and would involve the Arizona Department of Transportation, the Maricopa Association of Governments. However, we think it's a unique opportunity to really add options to the system in getting our residents in the community onto the 202.
That'd be great. Colby?
I have a question about that. Are there people, like I normally think of people from the east coming west on the 60 or the 202. Are there people that go east from, like they commute to like Mesa?
They go.
Yes.
They go home
Or
to
not.
Mesa. So what we.
Maybe they go home to Mesa.
Whatever comes, if they come into town,
they
they.
5 o'clock people going
Yes.
east.
Correct.
Okay, I was trying to think. I'm like, I'm like, do people go to work from Tempe to Mesa? It doesn't make any sense to me
Sometimes.
at all. Like, 4 of them? 5? But it makes more sense, right, if they're going home at the end of the day.
Right.
I go
Okay.
from Tempe to Mesa to work.
You're it, and there's 3
It's me.
coworkers. That's it.
Big idea number 8 was Priest Parkway. And this concept took Priest, which is really today operating a little under capacity given the number of lanes it has, and assumed that it would reduce access from side businesses. It would look at pulling out some of the signals, so maybe a little less signalization to give it more of a parkway capacity with more through capacity for streets. Again, this is one that did not rank very high because even though it had a great benefit to the traffic system, we saw that there was a negative impact to adjacent neighborhoods as we increased traffic volumes and potentially decrease access to Priest.
I think with the development of the SRP, what do we call it? The pier or the Grand?
Grant.
With the development of the Grand and what we have going on at Priest and Rio Salado, especially with the biotech campus we're looking at, I think you're going to see a lot more increase in traffic on Priest as a future than.
So the model took into account all entitled developments, so it should have accounted for that. But as Don indicated, it is not one that rose to the occasion of one that we would recommend, and we'll go into that a little bit more in the following slides. So big idea 9, which I think that several of you have commented on the need for, is pedestrian separation. This obviously by separating pedestrians and even bicyclists from the surface system, we can increase vehicle capacity and also safety. The 4 locations you see on the slide are those that we've identified moving forward with. And if you've ever traveled southbound on College and tried to make a left or a right on a university, you know the challenge associated with the pedestrians we're trying to move in that interaction with vehicles.
Lauren or Randy?
So today I participated in a transportation brown bag at ASU with the School of Geographical Sciences and Urban Planning, a number of students there and faculty, including one who's focused on complete streets, who said, you know, be careful what you wish for because there's been a lot of cases of these well, it's different. We're talking about the High Line Trail in New York. That's a whole nother kettle of fish. And it's more, you know, something very heavily touristed, not necessarily people who live in the city as much, but and they're finding a lot of these cases with these pedestrian separated areas that are rising above the street, that there's people tend not to use them very much, and they go underneath. They use it for the shade, so they use it for the shade structure, and also disincentivizes people to use the local businesses because they're walking above it, and so they're finding that they're not successful. And so I would really caution us, even though this seems like a great futuristic idea, when you look at the actual practice of what's happening in other cities, there's a lot of negative things associated with it, and they're just not being used like they thought they would be. So I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer here, but
Randy?
I must.
I'll be a Debbie Upper. I really like this idea. You know, Councilwoman Kubi's concerns aside, I do really like this idea. I do think it's something that we're going to need in the downtown area coming here in the next 10, 20 years. I do have a question, though. There's 2 dots right next to each other there. Is that the cross, the light rail, and then the cross the street? Is that what that is? So there would be 2?
So the university and rural would be at the intersection. You know, there's opportunities certainly with ASU's development of the southwest corner, the Novus Innovation Corridor on the northwest corner to really look at opportunities for connecting all of that. And so these were just intersections where we really saw the pedestrian safety and conflicts rise when we were looking at the model.
There's a couple of dynamics happening in that area. One is there's a lot of private student housing development that's happening on the east side of rural, south of University. How are all those kids going to get across University? That's one issue. The second is because of all that's happening in Tempe and particularly Novus Innovation Corridor, we think that light rail stop is going to become very consequential in the entire valley. It's in the center of the valley. So whether you're accessing the university, Novus, or Tempe or others, we just think, how are people going to get to and from that light rail station? They've got to cross rural, they've got to cross university. So we've got to, whether it's one monolithic bridge, as you saw, that interesting thing, or whether it's a combination of a couple, we think over the years, as that light rail stop becomes more impactful and more used for more reasons, people have to come and go from it.
Yeah.
And that's really the issue in my mind.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Kobe?
Yeah, I love this. I think I'd want to know a little bit more about the methodology of where you put your dots. Because the light rail one I understand, the one on the east side, sort of on University, I understand. But you mentioned that east of rural, south of University, there's a lot of development coming online. Like there's no more development coming online. Like it's built out. 8th Street is entirely built out all the way past Four Peaks. University is built out all the way past, all the way to McClintock. So I agree that there's going to be more housing built that way, but it seems like the majority of the housing is going to be built between Rio Salado and University. So all where Karsten Golf Course is, everything sort of north of Cornerstone. So I'm not sure. One, I thought mid-block would be a place to put that, because I assume a lot of people are going to go across where the street is mid-block there. I don't know what that is. Like, I don't even know what that street is.
College?
Sixth Street. Sixth Street, yeah, the one as like across from the White Dome, as you like go across the White, that loops around. Cause that's the one I see a lot of people taking now. But that's the area we're going to add 10,000 more people. And then the other thing I would say, we're not done with building along Apache east of University. There's at least a couple more big complexes that are going to come on there. And if you go any Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday night, it is a melee trying to get across rural and Apache, just because there are so many people in the residence halls that go across to the apartments to like socialize and then come back, that becomes almost like a complete transfer of people every day. And so I would say if you're going to do that, I'd say split them at the mid-block, Rio Salado and University, and the mid-block or east closer to Apache.
David? Joel, is that you?
Yeah, that's me, Mayor.
Okay. David?
Mayor, I agree with Councilmember Keating, and you and I talked about this before, Mayor, as well. I think this is absolutely necessary, and I think there's some ways that we can address some of the concerns that Councilmember Kuby raised. One, in terms of people using it for the shade. If you do, as you and I talked about, Mayor, a tunnel instead of a bridge like they did at Esplanade, then the only place there would be shade is in the alternative pedestrian walkway. Mm-hmm. And so if they're using it for shade, then they're using what they should be using, which is the tunnel. So I would prefer the tunnel over the bridge, although I think the bridge is kind of cool too. And then in terms of people skipping over using local businesses, if you do the trail like they did in New York, maybe that happens. But I don't know if that's what we're talking about. I mean, we're talking about pedestrian bridges or tunnels in locations where people are currently crossing streets.
Sure.
When you get on it, you're going to be by local businesses. When you get off it, you're going to be by local businesses.
Depends on the extent. I agree.
Yeah, depends on where it is. So I think we can address those concerns in the design, but I really love the Esplanade Tunnel, and I've talked to staff, and they say that that's pretty heavily used, and I've used it quite a few times myself at Esplanade. I think College would be a cool location for that.
So big idea number 10 is a park and ride lot with personalized rapid transit or some sort of a transit system, that it could even be van pooling or several ideas of how that could work. The idea behind this is we create more spaces around the perimeter of the core, we park off-site, and then we limit the vehicles coming into the downtown area.
Randy?
This is my favorite idea of the big ideas thus far, and since I looked through it earlier, I'm going to say it's hands down my favorite. I really think we need something like this outside of the downtown area, especially as downtown continues to grow, and we talk about these traffic calming measures and different opportunities to move pedestrians in and out of the downtown area. I think this is would be tantamount to a no-brainer. I think it's fantastic, and I would really hope that there's a support for it on council.
Lauren?
I spoke with Shelley about this earlier, and I know you don't mean literally the personal rapid transit that's described there, because that's an idea of like 13 years ago that's been a bit debunked since autonomous vehicle. I won't say crazed, since autonomous vehicles are not necessarily part of our infrastructure now, but you mean more of an autonomous vehicle setup, right, and not the pods on their on tracks.
Right.
Right?
So the idea, obviously, is that, like Don said, if we are able to bring people outside of the downtown area and offer them options, it could be the Uber and, you know, autonomous vehicles that we see moving forward as an option. As we go forward, technology is only going to change, and so as we move to implement something like this, we would look to what is working, look at other cities, and get ideas from, you know, people who know what have worked.
Randy?
Until we get our flying cars, which I know are coming up very quickly.
5 years away.
5 years away.
Almost 5 years away.
Would it be possible to do an orbit route to and from different park and rides throughout the city that kind of take people from the park and ride to the transportation center and just run, you know, every 10, 15 minutes? You know, I think that would be kind of a good solution between now and then.
Yes, for sure.
Great.
All right, so our last big idea is to add a lane in each direction on Rio Salado. This one we kind of put on the back burner because we really want to see how streetcar is assisting with the movement of people long term. We know our vision is to extend it out to Wrigley Field and to east of the 101. So it would widen from Packard to Price. Obviously, with widening, it'd be increasing the vehicle capacity on the roadway. The drawback, again, is anytime you widen a roadway, there is an impact on pedestrians in terms of crossing times. So again, this is one you'll see, although it's in the solution set, we would not recommend moving forward with it until we really see how streetcar is assisting. So I'm going to turn this one over to you.
Sure. So after we met and talked through the ideas that you just saw, we went through a decision ranking criteria, just a way for us to assign some qualitative and quantitative criteria and try to assess these for other merits, you know, not just the things that we thought were neat about them, but really trying to get it put onto paper. So we went through everything from community support, safety, roadway capacity. I can't read those other ones because my eyes aren't as good as they used to be. But from there we developed criteria for each one, and then we scored them, and we did the scoring process together. So we scored everything as a 1, 2, or 3, giving a special weighting to community support. So really we thought that the community support should weigh heaviest in terms of how ideas move forward in the city of Tempe. Based on that, we assigned green, yellow, and red circles more for the visual aspect. Of course, green going for the higher scores and red going for the lower scores. And what you'll see at the very bottom of that is the summation of numbers. So the summation of numbers comes from the 1, 2s, and 3s that we originally assigned. When you look at this chart up above, the darker green are the things that ranked the highest. There's a bit of a lighter green color. They ranked high, but let's call them high priority number 2. Then we have options in yellow and options in red. The red, of course, are the ones that we've completely taken off the table. Important to note, there's a couple of considerations here we really wanted to make sure we did not consider. One of those was cost, and the other one was time of implementation. Because the minute we threw in cost or time of implementation, some of the best ideas or biggest ideas would be automatically eliminated. So given that we were looking for generational solutions, we wanted to take away the cost and time to implement as real decision tools in this matrix.
All right, so that brings us to our recommended solution set. You'll see here that they're grouped into stakeholder involvement. So the first 3 ideas would involve Tempe, ASU, as well as the Novus Innovation Corridor. The second set would be ASU, Tempe, and our regional partners. And then the third set would really be focused on Tempe and our regional partners. So finally, our next steps are to identify an outreach plan and opportunities for implementation of the big ideas, developing an infrastructure improvement plan, and updating the streets and wastewater development fees, as I've indicated, to better reflect the conditions we're seeing as part of the model. So what we're asking tonight is to develop an agreement to keep the model updated. We know that this is an important part of moving forward and ensuring that the model is something we can use going forward. And so it would be updated every 6 months or with major development. So if we know in the model something's changing and it causes a major change in the outputs, we would want to update that.
Councilman Granville?
Thank you, Mayor. So I assume that, so as these move forward or they're sort of continue to be pondered, that's going to change, obviously, our impact fees up, because we're going to say, look, we know long-term in this area, we're going to build pedestrian bridges, or we're going to build some park and rides, and so you need to start all chipping in for that a little bit, over the next generational time period. But a good portion of that is going to be ASU's impact is going to be a big portion of the impact we're talking about. Will any of their projects be subject to these sort of enhanced impact fees related to this? Or are they exempt from all those impact fees?
So I'm going to answer that, Mayor, Council Member. So the way our development fees work is that we assign proportional costs based on a rational nexus and proportionality.
Sure.
So ASU in the role of being a developer, whatever those projects are, would be subjected to the same fees that the city has across the board. As an educational institution, they're
exempt
for those fees.
Okay.
Yeah, so and that's how it is right now. I think the first part of what you said too is that we don't just all of a sudden say, hey, well, we gave you our big presentation tonight. There's 11 good big ideas, and it sounded like you guys liked 3 of them, so we're throwing those in the infrastructure improvement plan. That will come forward as a separate effort to you guys and have you think about that as you look at how does that affect impact fees? Does this seem like a reasonable solution set? Because once you stick something in the infrastructure improvement plan, you have to have the desire and the willingness to have that done in 10 years.
So then the other part I would add, and first off, that's good to hear. I wasn't sure if ASU would be subject to these impact fees or not in their case of using sort of commercial development. If that's the case, then I would assume that given their sort of aggressive schedule and the amount of land they have, their people are going to be paying 30, 40% of this overall burden potentially when you look at the build out over 30 years where it's likely to go. So I assume you've already talked to them to ask them how they score these things, because there might be things that they know or that they value that will affect the decision-making process, because they're going to know better than anyone. Like a bridge here would be good, or a thing here would be good, or Rio Salado being 6 lanes would really mess us up, or...
So a couple things, and I'll let John speak for ASU since he's sitting here. But
And he's like waiting to get
a couple of
in.
things. I think it's really important. I can't overemphasize this. Impact fees, and Shelley said, it's not a way to make improvements to the system and the transportation grid that are already deficient. It's a way to say, if you add X% more stress to the system over the next 10 years, you're going to pay a proportional share of that. So I'm making one up, but let's say it was a project that cost $100. It might be that impact fees account for $9 of that $100. That's all. So I think that's important. But to your point, John has been instrumental in helping create these rankings. So his input, his fingerprints are all over this.
Comfortable with it. Like, nah.
This has been a joint effort between ASU and the city and others to come up with this, because again, we both recognize the impacts that all development has, and we both want, the quality of life and the outcomes to benefit everybody. Just to kind of clear something up, when ASU is engaged in private development, not public development, private vertical developers would be subject to those impact fees, not ASU per se. It would be whoever's building something above ground that's private, they're subject to, the Tempe fees, whatever they may be, whether they're impact or otherwise.
Councilman Cubey?
Can we go to slide 2, I believe, where we show our performance measures? So that's right. So what we really have with the performance measures, which fed into the model, there you go, the priority. We have one that essentially wants us to increase vehicular capacity, number 2, and then we have Vision 0, which wants to achieve a reduction in fatalities. So there's kind of an inherent contradiction there. If we increase vehicular capacity, which 7 of these 11 big project ideas do, we move cars faster, we also introduce potential safety conflicts. And that's the conundrum that you face as a traffic engineer. I realize that. But fundamentally, you also want to reduce the number of people that are driving into this district. And that's why the idea with the outward areas where we bring people in, I think, is such a good idea. But we need to incentivize walking and biking more, reducing the number of cars on the road and making it attractive for people to walk and bike. And so what's going to make it more attractive for people to walk? it's going to be increasing shade. And I say shade is a fundamental transportation issue. It's an equity issue. It's fundamentally a transportation issue. And I know Arizona as a state, Phoenix is a general area. We have a higher bicycle mode share than any other area in the country, which is interesting. And we have a lower pedestrian mode share, and it's because of the lack of shade. And people will chart their walk and what they can walk according to what kind of shade is available for them. So I just want to emphasize that all these, we're going to hear about our urban forestry plan. It's intimately, I think, connected to this plan for 2040 and how we get more people off the road and willing to ride their bikes and walk within the city perimeter, within the downtown. So just want to emphasize that, and that we need to have an equity lens sort of inserted in these big project ideas, because that's not necessarily a variable. And David, you brought that up when you mentioned the potential of closing down the light rail for a year. The people that are most impacted by that are going to be more vulnerable people who are disproportionately, poor, low-income people. So it's really important to keep the equity lens firmly applied. And 7 of the 11 projects are all about increasing vehicular capacity. So I would just ask, us to think about, biking projects too, and maybe when you establish a track system for bicycling, you actually increase the safety for pedestrians as well. So maybe that's something we should be looking at in the downtown area. I believe that you guys are looking at bike track systems, but fundamentally, most of these projects, 7 of 11 ideas, are all about increasing vehicular capacity, which will have induced demand, which will serve to increase traffic within the city. And that's one of my concerns as we go forward. Not to be a Debbie Downer, but we need to think about these things seriously, and they're all interconnected with everything else we do. So just want to be as thorough and as critical as we can to make a better city.
Thank you. All right.
Mayor, I apologize. I want to make sure that I'm understanding that we can go ahead and continue to keep this partnership together.
We need to continue to keep the partnership. Thank you for
Thank
doing
you.
that. Thank you to CIVTech and ASU for the partnership on this as well. All right, next item is ballot by mail-in. I think Brigitta's going to come down and talk to us. This is exciting. We're going to try to do an all mail-in ballot. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Brigitta Kuiper, City Clerk, and I'm returning tonight to provide you with an update on potentially holding the spring 2018 elections by mail. Christine Deister with Maricopa County Elections was supposed to be with us tonight. However, she's actually providing a presentation to the Kyrene School District tonight on this exact same issue on ballot by mail. But I wanted to publicly thank her for assisting with the 2 public forums that we had, inviting Maricopa County officials there and having the demonstration. Also in the audience tonight is Kelsey Wilson. She's sitting back there. She is with the Arizona State University Undergraduate Student Government, and we met with that group as well. So as you will recall, back in May, I along with Maricopa County election officials, presented information to you regarding ballot by mail elections, and this presentation was requested by Mayor Mitchell. And at that time, you as council directed staff to go back and solicit some public input and return to council with the results. So I'm back tonight to report on the outreach efforts and the feedback we received. And I'm also seeking council direction on whether to proceed with the ballot by mail election for March and May of 2018. One thing that you will note with the title of this presentation is that it changed from vote by mail election to ballot by mail election. And the reason for that is a couple of months ago, county recorders and election officials got together and they agreed on standard language, and they changed the terminology to ballot by mail to more clearly indicate that while it is, you do receive your ballot by mail, you can either vote in person or vote by mail. So just as a recap for our audience from the prior presentation, in a ballot by mail election, all registered voters will receive a ballot in the mail 27 days prior to the election. There are no polling places in a ballot by mail election. So for Tempe, we have about 89,500 registered voters. It's gone up a little bit since May. And of those, 67% are currently on the permanent early voting list, or the PEVOL list, and they already received their ballot by mail. And also at our last City of Tempe election in March of 16, 94% of our voters voted an early ballot. So instead of having polling places and early voting sites, what there would be are ballot centers. And what a ballot center does is it provides options for voting, and it basically provides three options. First, voters can vote in person at a ballot center instead of voting the ballot that was mailed to them. Voters can also request a replacement ballot if they lose or damage the ballot they received in the mail. However, before a ballot center opens, voters still would have the option of contacting Maricopa County for a replacement ballot by mail. And then the third option is voters can drop off their voted ballot at the ballot center instead of returning it through the U.S. mail. Staff used various tools to inform the community of the public input opportunities for ballot by mail elections. We utilized Tempe Today, both the July and August editions. We had articles. We also developed a flyer that was emailed to all our board and commission liaisons, who in turn emailed it to all our board and commission members. We also emailed it to our neighborhood and homeowner associations, and then our standard email lists. We also utilized the Clean Elections Commission. They promoted our forums and they provided an opportunity for public input. We had several news articles. We utilized the city website on our banner page, and we had a dedicated web page on the clerk's site for ballot by mail elections. And then, of course, we utilized our various social media, Facebook and Twitter social media for outreach. So the feedback was received from various stakeholder groups. First and foremost was the Tempe Online Forum. We received 199 views of the forum with 150 comments, and the details are provided in your agenda packet. We also held 2 public forums, and they were joint presentations, as I mentioned before, between the city and Maricopa County elections, where they also demonstrated their self-service check-in terminals and their ballot-on-demand printers. Joel Edmond from the Arizona Advocacy Network was also one of our stakeholders, along with the Clean Elections Commission, as I mentioned previously. Staff also met with the Chamber of Commerce Government Relations and Transportation Committee and provided the same presentation, and again with Arizona State University Undergraduate Student Government. So we met with ASU because in the past, ASU has paid for, funded an early voting site on the ASU campus for Tempe elections. When we met with them, they were not interested at this time in having a ballot center on ASU, basically due to the past usage of the early voting site. For the last city election, they had a site, they funded it for approximately 20 days, and about 13 voters went. So they were a little concerned with those costs, and they also felt that most of their students wouldn't be hesitant to drop off their ballot by mail.
Councilman Cuban?
Yes.
Questions about the ASU issue, because spring break is March 4th through 11th, and so maybe that's part of it too. So 11th is Sunday, so Monday and Tuesday being election day, it wouldn't be successful to have it open during spring break, so that might be part of it. But I think the actual election day, there was a lot of attendance, a lot of voting on the ASU campus on the actual election day in November, right?
In November,
But not the
absolutely,
city.
because that was a federal election, yes. What I was referring to was strictly the City of Tempe election.
Right, I
yes.
understand
Yeah. However, just to expand on our conversations with ASU, they did express an interest in potentially having a ballot collection site on ASU. They are going to work with Maricopa County Elections on that. There are some security issues with that, so there's some things that would have to be worked out because a ballot collection site has to be manned 24/7 or locked up. It can't be left alone. So those are some details that they would be looking at to work out with Maricopa County Elections. We also talked about other partnership opportunities, and we agreed that we would share promotional materials, especially our social media. They have a Facebook page that they've agreed to help us out with our promotions. They also talked about perhaps developing short video clips that they can place on their Facebook page. And then last, they invited us, the clerk's office and neighborhood services, to participate in their National Voter Registration Day event, which is next week on September 26th. And we'll be doing that, and we'll be able to provide information about local elections and voter participation at that event. So let's talk a little bit about the survey results. As I mentioned, we had 150 responses from the Tempe Forum, and basically 83% of the responses were in favor of a ballot by mail election, and 17% were not in favor for various reasons. What we did as staff, we took a look at all the comments and we saw a couple of themes, so I'd like to just review those briefly for you. The first theme we saw was ballot security. There was concern that there would be a lot of fraud in a vote-by-mail election only. That's actually not true, because on each envelope that is mailed out, there is a barcode, and so that piece of mail is tracked from when it leaves Maricopa County Elections to when it returns to Maricopa County Elections. In addition, for each ballot, they are signature verified, so someone has to check the signature and match it against the voter registration signature to ensure that it is the same person voting that ballot. And as a reminder, every single signature is verified. The second theme we saw is people wanted confirmation that their ballot was received and counted. Because when you go to a poll, you can put your ballot in the machine and you know it's counted. We actually found out a little education is needed, because you can find out now the exact status of your ballot through Maricopa County's website. You can check the status when it was mailed out, when it was received back by Maricopa County, when the signature was verified, and when it was counted. And we also provide a link on the clerk's webpage to Maricopa County's website, but we'll do some additional education on that. And then last, we learned from Maricopa County that they're working to implement an opt-in program for people to receive text messages about the status of their ballots. We're not sure that it'll be ready for our elections in March and May, but they are working towards that. The third comment we received was loss of election day. We know that there's a lot of people like to go to the polls. It's the voting experience and getting the I voted stickers. However, I will point out that voters can still have the option of voting in person at a ballot center, and ballot centers are open for an extended period of time, not just on election day, and you can get your sticker at a ballot center. And then the last comment that we heard, or theme that we heard, was the ballot center location. And what we found, or what Maricopa County has found, is that really a minimal number of people use the ballot center as compared to an early voting site, because all the voters do receive their ballot by mail. And as a reminder for our Tempe residents, in 2015, Tempe Union High School District, their entire election was a vote-by-mail election in 15, and in November of this year, both Tempe Union and Kyrene school districts are holding ballot-by-mail elections. So our voters are familiar with that process. The ballot center location that we've chosen is the library complex, and because that's similar to the early voting site, it's centrally located. It's what we've used for many years, and our voters are very familiar with that site. However, in our elections for 2018, the location of a ballot center will need to be moved. It'll still be at the library complex, but it would need to be moved to the Tempe History Museum, because the library is undergoing renovations on the second floor, and that space is not available, or won't be available for our March and May elections. But the museum is still located, as I mentioned, in the library complex. It meets the same criteria as the library. It's centrally located, it's easily accessible, it has adequate parking, public transportation is available, ADA compliant, and then in addition, utilizing the museum will allow staff to showcase that city facility. So based on the comments that we received about ballot centers, I wanted to provide a little bit of additional information regarding Maricopa County's recommended configuration. It's on this slide. It's also in your meeting packet. So as part of our contract with Maricopa County Elections, the per voter fee for a ballot by mail election is $2.12, and that includes the cost of one ballot center for a jurisdictional election, and that would be, so for example, our Tempe election. So in that chart, it outlines we would have one site in Tempe. The number of days open, the standard number of days open would be 5. It would be Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then all day Tuesday. It would be staffed by four county staff members. There would be 6 self-service check-in terminals and 1 ballot-on-demand printer. And that is opposed to a countywide election, which, as you can see, there are additional sites and use of what they call mega sites. But just to put it in perspective, for the Tempe election, we have just shy of 90,000 registered voters. But for a countywide election, right now they're at about 2.2 million registered voters, so it really is a little different with 1.5 million on the permanent early voting list. So from the public input, we did hear concerns about only having the one ballot center. We heard those. And the additional concern was only having it open for 5 days. So I will mention that if council is interested in having an additional ballot center, or if you'd like to have it open for more than 5 days, the city would have to bear those costs. And the other thing to keep in mind is if you're interested in a second ballot center site, we need to make sure the site has the appropriate space requirements, adequate parking, public transportation, easy access, and then if it's a city facility we're using, we just need to be cognizant of the impacts to programming and services. So to outline what those costs are, if you would like to have an additional ballot center for 5 days total, the additional cost would be at $2,500, and that would pay for the Maricopa County Elections Department staffing. There would be other costs. We potentially would have to pay for some city staffing, potentially some security, and then again, if it's a city facility, just be cognizant of impact to rental revenue, or if it's a non-city facility, perhaps we have to pay a rental fee. Now, if council is interested in taking our existing ballot center site at the museum and adding 6 additional days, again, it would just be about a $3,000 additional cost with the other costs as necessary.
It's not $3,000 a day, it's just that the total cost would be $3,000 to go
Correct.
to 6 days
Correct.
versus 5
The
days.
additional 6 days would
11.
be $3,000. It would go to 11 days
11
total.
days.
Correct. Correct. The 5 days, again, are for one ballot center are automatically included in our cost. We would just pay the additional 6 days.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
So with that, the next steps is I'm seeking council consensus on whether or not to pursue a ballot by mail election in 2018. And if so, as staff, we would develop an educational campaign working obviously with our community relations, media relations, and neighborhood services staff. And in addition, we would bring forward a city council action to modify our call of election, calling a ballot by mail election. And we would put that forward on a future regular council meeting agenda. And with that, I am available to answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you. I think this is exciting. Just one question though, is there any way from any past elections where you could tell how many voters used it? If we had more days that they used those additional days versus the normal days that you had?
In the 5 versus 11.
Yeah,
In the
10
5
versus the 5, I think it was.
5 versus, it's very, very hard to compare elections because, for example, we can't compare our March election with our
Right, to the
November
November.
election. And because we don't have any data showing what specifically a Tempe voter would use for the 5 to 7, I can't give you those
That's fine, I was just
those
curious in the
details.
data, but
Right.
if the only cost is $3,000 total,
What I can do, though, is after the November election, we'll have some data on our Tempe residents utilizing
Oh,
the
for the-
ballot
for the
center
ballot for the
there.
schools.
However, it's hard to compare that as well because in November, there are 26 jurisdictions holding an election. It's not just Tempe Union or Kyrene. So again, it's really hard to compare different types of elections.
Lauren?
Brigida, Clerk of the Year, you've done an outstanding job in just reaching out to all the stakeholders, to all the public engagement events. I went to one in the library, and it was so great to just, in a tactile way, see what it was like to pretend to be someone who doesn't know where their polling place is, and they could get your ballot printed out, and I think it was like 20 seconds, and I even fumbled a bit with the keys with my sausage fingers. So it was really remarkable, and commending the Recorder's Office for partnering with us and coming up with this idea. I think it's going to be great for voter turnout and just for ease of voting. And I've talked to a lot of people at the doors who are concerned and really like to vote at the polling place, but when they heard that they could, if there's any problem, they could come to the library, perhaps an extended period of time, 11 days instead of 6, they like that much more, the people I've been speaking with. And I think it's sort of a no-brainer that, especially the first time we're doing this, that we increase the number of days to 11. And I would even advocate that we do an extra center and perhaps it be at City Hall because this is the first time we're doing it, and I think it's better to err on the side of caution. The cost is, what, $2,500, assuming there may be some extra city staff costs, but if we could do something maybe even at City Hall or a different part of the city, I think that would be wise because this is the first time, and I think we do want to err on the side of caution and on the side of encouraging people to vote, and it's going to be new.
The only question I have is the $3,000, that, can your budget cover that, or you be seeking additional? Okay.
We can cover that based on the savings that a ballot by mail
All right.
election
That makes
provides. Correct, because we budgeted for a polling place election, not knowing what council
I
wanted.
think the educational outreach is paramount, and I think since Tempe Union has already done it, and now they're going to do it again, I think more our registered voters are going to understand the ease of using a ballot by mail. I'm fine with moving forward with that. If you're looking at additional cost, additional center, I don't know if it's warranted. I would defer to you. Is it covered, or you have to have additional funds for that? It's minimal, but at the same time, I understand the caution side of it, but I'm just, one or the other. I just wanted your professional opinion. David?
Colby said it well. I don't know if you heard him, Mayor. He said it's cheap insurance. Having not done it before, it's a relatively low cost to ensure that we have as much accessibility as possible for voting in a way that we, voters are not as familiar with in municipal elections. So I think it's pretty inexpensive just to ensure that we have,
maybe the savings
opportunities possible.
by the ballot by mail could really cover everything. Councilman Granville?
Yeah, when the second polling site was initially sort of mentioned, I was like, we've always had the one. But the thing that didn't occur to me until I sort of pondered it for a minute is you can print out your ballot anywhere in the county, right? So you could be in Mesa or Gilbert or Chandler or whatever. And for people, particularly public transportation people, there is a site right here that everyone goes through that might not be used by Tempe residents, but given the number of buses that pull in and out of our transportation center, that could be a regional hub for anyone.
We're only talking about city elections, though. We're not talking about county.
For city elections, I actually don't think that this site would be worth it. But for the other elections,
But that's not us. We're only talking about city elections.
all right, then never mind. Then
I don't believe you can print out your ballot at any place in the
You
county
can.
for the regular elections.
for regular elections, I think you can.
Yes, you can, if you use a ballot center.
Oh,
just
At
to
a
be
ballot
clear.
center,
So I said you're
correct.
doing a ballot
yes.
center somewhere here, so that
Right.
as your
Early voting center.
right where buses come in and out, that could be where you get your you do your Mesa thing or.
But that would only make sense. What you're saying is
But not
if the
city
county
election.
went all ballot.
The only question I
all
have is,
mail-in ballot.
I know it's irrelevant, if it's warranted to be here, could the cost savings, could you have that in your budget cover the cost to have those two centers with the additional days?
We sure could. One thing, though, I do want to mention, though, is if you would like to increase the libraries, the number of days of the library, or excuse me, the museum, library complex, to 11, then I just want you to think about whether a second site is needed and where it should be. We can hold one at City Hall, and that's actually relatively easy because it would be in my office, so that is very easy to do that. To have it at another site, we would have to think about where the appropriate location would be based on our voters. And that's not something that I'm prepared to comment on right here today. I would need to take another look at our voter map. But having another site here is not a problem at all, although we're only like 3 miles from the library. So, I mean,
No.
it's a delicate balance because this is the first time that we're having proposing to have a ballot by mail. So we want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to vote that way. That's why the educational component is going to be so, so important. And by utilizing our partners, Maricopa County and ASU, I think we can really do some pretty good outreach.
Councilman Cubic?
Yeah, and the City Hall location intrigues me because it helps the North Tempe voters, and it's easier to access than the library. And then the ASU question becomes sort of null because it's easier for ASU students perhaps to vote here than at the library. They can walk here. So, and there's, there's free parking next door, and of course the proximity to the light rail and the orbits, and so there seems to be makes a lot of sense. And if there is a funding need that you can't furnish with your budget, you can think about innovation funding because it's going to be a one-time experiment.
It sounds like we could cover it, it's just more of a
We can cover
logistics
it,
issue.
yeah. It's not, because of
So the direction is to
cost
move forward
savings.
with the historical museum component, adding the 6 days, so you have 11 days.
11 days total, correct?
And then looking at having a second location here at City Hall. Just, you need to make sure that if it's covered, if it's not, you can figure it out. But it sounds like with the savings, we could utilize that.
I agree with you,
Okay,
Okay?
if you're comfortable with that, I'll provide you an update,
There
and
you go.
we'll be looking at.
Everybody good with that?
Yeah.
Good
Colby,
with that?
David, you guys good with that?
Yeah, I think
Okay,
Okay.
all right, thank you.
Thank you, Brianna. All right, next item is our boarding commission residency requirements. Ms. Higgins?
Mayor and Council, Elizabeth Higgins, Chief of Staff to the Mayor and Council. So on April 6, 2017, Council agreed to add a discussion on residency requirements for Tempe's boards or commission. And the direction was given to report back which of our boards and commissions required residency and research other peer cities to see what they do with their boards and commissions. So Tempe has 27 boards and commissions, 19 require residency for all or certain positions. I'll just highlight the ones that do not require residency for all of their positions. The Arts and Culture Commission says that no less than 51% should be residents. The Tempe Family Justice Commission has 4 at-large members who reside, work, or attend school in Tempe. And the Tempe Sustainability Commission says there's 2 at-large Tempe, 1 student that lives in Tempe, and where residency is not required, there's a preference given to applicants who live or work in the city of Tempe. There's 8 of our commissions out of those 27 that do not require residency at all. Tempe, our fire and police, public safety boards, our hearing office, our joint review committee, which there are City of Tempe appointees to that, so I believe that those are City of Tempe residents. The Risk Management Board, our Sponsorship Review Board, which we don't often use, our Technical Advisory Board, and then the Tempe Veterans Commission, which has certain experts from different fields in the area. So when looking at all of our boards and commissions, there was a little bit of a trend that said if it's more community-centric and not a specialized or technical board, that they were to residents of the city of Tempe. There was also a trend with the last few boards and commissions that were introduced, they had more flexibility with the residency requirement. And so in researching, I contacted 7 of our neighboring cities, 5 of them, Mesa, Scottsdale, Glendale, Avondale, and the town of Gilbert, all required residency to serve on any of their boards of commissions. That's from I spoke to their clerk's office. Phoenix and Chandler do allow non-residency. Chandler only in certain occasions. Chandler had 3 where they did not require it. Their Domestic Violence Commission, their Economic Development Advisory Board, and their Workers' Comp Board. For their domestic violence, 6 of the 11 had to be residents, and then Economic Development, they had to be residents or own a business operating in Chandler. And then the City of Phoenix sort of had the widest arraignment of who was required to be a resident and who wasn't. in just kind of looking at the city of Phoenix and their requirements, if it was transportation related, if it was design or planning or historic preservation or their IDA, those were kind of reserved for residency, although some of them are 3/4 or 1/2, things like that. And then where they did not require residency at all was their arts and culture, their aviation board, their human relations commission, library board, parks and rec, their mayor's commission on disability issues, and then their PSPRS, their public safety boards. So I would just look for the council to see if they wanted to give us direction to go back to any specific boards and commissions to see if they had any thought about whether residency was required for any single one.
I think this is, I think what we've done, I think we've shown a very good variety of the new boards and commissions we've added with certain expertise in certain subject matter. I think we've allowed that. I like the way it is. I would be opposed to trying to change it. I think the value of our residents are so important. The whole reason why boards and commissions were created in the first place was to get that active citizen involvement and get the views of our residents. And I think, we've been really good. If you look at, we have 8 boards that we don't require 100% Tempe residents. Even on some that we require Tempe residents, we allow some members from outside the city with certain subject expertise matter to be involved. And I think this really fits the model of what we're looking at. Councilman Granville, then Councilman Cubey.
Thanks, Mayor. So I tend to agree with you. I don't think this is something that's broken that needs fixing. I think it's more something about just can we make it better. And for me, there are some of these boards of the 8 that don't have requirements where it's meant to be really, it's not just technical skills, like the Technical Code Advisory Board. I don't care where you're from. Like, you have to read a technical manual, you have to understand it. It is a level of expertise and specialization that if you've got it, God bless you for being willing to serve. But there are other ones where I think it is helpful to have someone who's uniquely situated to understand the needs of Tempe. Maybe not all of the people, but maybe 51%. Those being the hearing officer. Obviously, that's going to affect what's immediately in a neighborhood. The Joint Review Committee, because again, that affects immediately what ASU is doing or what we're doing near a neighborhood. And the Tempe Veterans Commission is another one I could see where this is something specific. And I'm not saying all of them, because I'm sure there are various criteria for those. But for the hearing officer, the Joint Review Committee, and the Veterans Commission, I would think some of them, like 25%, 51%, should have to be Tempe residents.
Okay. Councilman Cubey?
Mayor, when do you have a chance?
Okay.
So looking at the case of the Sustainability Commission, and I was, chief in drawing up some of those rules we really did allow. We wanted to be able to bring the best, the thought leaders, the ones taking action in the community, and those that lived, worked, and played, and ASU students and faculty and staff. And so we did more beyond what you said. We give a preference to Tempe residents, but I don't know where Ann Gill lives, but she is the representative from the Business Advocacy Group, for example. We wanted the Chamber of Commerce or Local First or something represented, not knowing where they live, but that was an important constituency. I agree generally with what you say, but I think the Transportation Commission is a glaring example of where we could really benefit from folks at ASU who may not necessarily reside in reside in the city of Tempe, but have a lot to offer. There's one particular scientist who is sort of the national leader in complete streets, envisioning transportation projects, who very much wants to bring the university into the city, into the university, and the university into the city, and involving his students in projects. He's very interested in serving. And so that's kind of originally why I brought this up, is one of the examples that, and I'm not saying that we should decide for the Transportation Commission, but just let them decide if that's the case, because there's a lot of expertise in our urban planning department and geography, and we're kind of not taking advantage of it like we are with the Sustainability Commission, like we are with the Family Justice Commission. I wouldn't want to be without the faculty and academic interests we have represented on the Family Justice Commission, for example.
Don't we have I'm going to go to Joel. To your question, though, don't we have an ASU representative on transportation or a student?
I don't believe there's anything specific as to a requirement.
I was just curious. All right. Councilman Navarro?
Yeah, Mayor, I think I can agree with you. The first thing that came up is what Councilmember Granville said. I don't know what's broke. Really, I don't. I think how we have it lined up is great. I think it's great that we're trying to engage. I know we need to do a better job engaging our communities and really get more leaders involved in our community. I mean, that's a value. I kind of, when they read off the list on the Phoenix on how they're more lenient, I was like, that's a shame. I mean, the city of Phoenix, they should have a pool of expertise in all areas that represents their city. And so I see the value of having, really our community involved in what's being said or what's being recommended towards the council. I agree that there should be an expert, where needed, on whatever board or, that requires it. And I think we're lenient on that, but I think the majority should be residents for sure, on how we proceed from here. The bottom line is when we talk about, as we get into transportation and like we talked about tonight, the board is a recommendation for the council, and ultimately the council has to bring in experts also. The council has to also engage and make sure that our staff is utilizing those experts and making sure that we're, getting the best quality for our residents. And it's not to say that the boards and the commission doesn't advise us. They do. And I think they add tremendous value, especially the Human Relations Commission. When you said the Human Relations Commission in Phoenix can be from anywhere, I was like, that's sad. It doesn't represent what's within the city. So I think how we have it, I feel confident in it. I think it's great. I think, Councilmember QB said if there's an expert from ASU and it allows it in our boards and commission, I think, we use that expert. But I think for the most part, it's our citizens. So I kind of like it how it is right now. I think we're doing a great job, and see if we can go forward.
David?
I mean, I agree sort of, I think, with a hybrid of what folks are saying. I think if there's someone who is a particular expert in a particular area, obviously that should be a consideration. But if we have in any of the boards or commissions, all things being equal, I think we should give preference to Tempe residents. But that's only when all things are equal. If not, then I think we should be willing to look for expertise from folks that are outside of our city.
One of the things, and I don't disagree with that at all, I don't disagree with any of the comments that have been made. The only thing I would say is when it comes to expertise, as Councilman Navarro mentioned, our boards and commissions are just in an advisory capacity. One of the things we did, and I know when we worked with the streetcar, we went to ASU to get some expertise on hydrogen capacity.
Hydrogen extended.
The flex capacitor
Electric
from
battery.
Back to the Future. No, the hydrogen capacity. We went, and there's nothing preventing seeking the Transportation Commission seeking advice from those experts related to ASU. In fact, I think we always encourage that, and that's, as Councilman Navarro mentioned, that's what we as a council say. Hey, if we're going to be exploring something that's some really good, just like for example, we partnered with ASU on the earlier model on a traffic study with CivTech, which is the professional group. I mean, we do that all the time. We engage at ASU. I don't think changing a board and commission's requirements when we have just to fit one particular person, I don't know if that's it. I'm not discouraging. I think it's a great opportunity to engage, which we should as a council anyways. When there's major policy that's happening, I think we already do that initially, and we work with the advisory from our boards and commissions on certain subject matter. And if there's anything above and beyond, I think we are, I know we do because we've done it, seek the expertise and advice of our partners within the region. Councilman
So,
Cubey.
Mr. Mayor, two members of the Transportation Commission did approach me and asked, like, what's the best way to look at this? Because our commission wants to look at this, or at least they want to in the commission to look at this issue. And I think we should let, if a commission wants to expand how they and reflect modernity, that's not a good word, then they should be able to, consider that for themselves, and we don't necessarily need to decide. But
Well, no,
the Sustainability Commission, the Family Justice Commission, the Veterans Commission, all the newer commissions have allowed for that sort of flexibility, and it's still dominantly a City of Tempe resident commission, each one of them. But why not let the Transportation Commission, if they so decide, to say, yeah, we'll allow a few if we see expertise that we really feel is needed on that commission.
What's preventing the Transportation Commission now from seeking advice from expert subject matters from ASU? So when they have an issue that comes forward at a committee meeting, what's preventing them now from engaging? the expert subject matter on certain questions. Like you said, if they have what's the best way to approach this? Well, nothing's preventing them from working through us or through
No.
representative staff to get that information. That's all I'm saying.
A positive gloss on it. It's not what's preventing. It's like, how do we encourage this kind of information exchange and these pipelines of ideas and projects and passions and funding and initiatives? It's another pipeline, and it just reflects, I think, how we are partners with ASU, and there are people intensely interested in City of Tempe as a learning laboratory for students, and it always comes back and benefits us when we engage students and faculty and researchers and staff in some of our biggest ideas. Some of our biggest ideas.
Again, I'm not opposed. I think
So why
our
not let
best
them
work has been
decide?
open to, inclusive to open anyone with, especially with subject matter expertise. I don't think no one's saying we're not going to be able to do that.
No,
I don't know if we're changing one commission based on one individual, I
No, I'm
think
not
that's.
saying we are changing. I said, why
Well,
don't we
even if
put it
it's
back to the
one board and
commission?
commission, I just don't want, I just make sure that, I'd love to get their feedback from the boards and commissions and see what they all have to say. But I still think, as I think the majority of the council, the majority of the people on these boards and commissions need to be Tempe residents. And I wouldn't,
Not
I
disputing
wouldn't,
that. So
I would
this is
not
a case we'll say we're
even
not
say,
necessarily
yeah,
disagreeing with each
and I
other.
would say, I would not have, if you're looking at that one particular individual, I would like to see go back to the board, the Transportation Commission, and see what they have to say.
Well,
And have them come back to us.
again, you're kind of misrepresenting my statement because I'm not saying that at all. And you can see the Sustainability Commission, the way we drew it up was, preference given, like Councilmember Shapiro said, preference given to City of Tempe residents. But we wanted to capture the expertise out there. And it might be somebody who lives in Mesa or Chandler, but is every day spends their profession and their work day in the City of Tempe that are bringing us potentially really good projects or expertise. And you're right, of course, it's not going to stop someone from coming forward, but when you're on a commission, you're much more engaged in the work and know inherently what's going on related to transportation, whereas if you're just a citizen, you might find out in drips and drabs, you're contacted by something. This is a more of a steady information flow where there can be, intelligent planning and ideas that come from it. And so, I'm not saying we should dictate it, but why not just ask the commission what they want to do, just give them
I have no problem asking Commissioner.
pressure relief they can do.
Councilman Shapiro. I think that'd be good to ask the commissions.
Okay.
Yeah, and I agree with both of you on that. I think, Mayor, the concern I have is with a litmus test that would exclude a Vic Linoff or a Dave Wells from serving on a board or a commission. Some people who are so ingrained in this community and have been for so long, but don't have a Tempe home address. So that's where I kind of come back to this, I think all things being equal, I don't want to come up with any more examples, but if we had someone like Vic or Dave, and there was someone else who's just as ingrained in the Tempe community, but that person has a Tempe address, then I would say, yeah, that person should get preference because they're going to be impacted more by the decisions that we make and therefore have a greater stake in whatever the issue is than someone who doesn't have a Tempe address. But I think it should be I think just generally, it should be a all things being equal kind of a thing. Like if the Sustainability Commission, the Transportation Commission, or whatever is looking specifically for someone with certain expertise, I don't want to say we're willing to settle for someone with less expertise because that person has a Tempe address. But I do think it should be a preference.
And to your point, if anything, without a doubt, I think we all can agree if it's a case-by-case basis, which we've done that. We've allowed for sustainability of the committees. If you look at arts and cultural, if you look at the Tempe Sustainable Commission, if you look at the Tempe Family Justice Commission, those all allow expert matter substitutes to come in. And then if you look at the 8 that we don't require a residency, I think we have a really good balance. Now, if you're just talking about the Transportation Commission, I would never want to do a one-off. I would like to get input from the Transportation Commission and what the majority of the commission would say, knowing that, I wouldn't, that's going to come back to us. Ultimately, we make the decision. But I think it's important that we suggest, before you make anything happens, that you would ask that commission. Yeah. Because if you look at what we have done exactly what we're all talking about, getting some exceptions with some expertise, subject matter. We've opened it up to we've already done that. What I fear is I don't want to lose that the whole point of the boards and commissions is to get an active citizen engaged. We also want this, nothing's preventing subject matter experts from partaking in any of the discussions, because as a council, we historically have always done that. We've always tried to get the best information we can possible to make an informed decision, and that's by, and we've engaged all the experts, and we continue to do so. But in this case, I'm fine if, I think it's important that we get this right, and that we ask the board and commission. In this case, I think we're just asking for the Transportation Commission.
Thank you, Mayor. And I think we have a pretty good consensus here. I would just add, assuming the consensus continues, is that we also ask the hearing officer, the Joint Review Committee, the Tempe Veterans Commission.
Veterans Commission allows people outside of.
No, but
Yeah.
he's going to say %.
Yeah, if they have if for those three, the ones that really are, that are, what their thoughts are on if there should be a percentage or a preference or anything related to residency, where 25%, 50%, or preference is given, and see what their thoughts are about, at least for those three boards also. And if they come back and say, we don't need it, I'm willing to respect that too.
Okay.
So, Mayor, just real quick, the hearing officer is a little bit of a different one. It's on this list because it's listed as a public body, but it is not actually one that is,
An RFP for that.
appointed by the mayor. It actually comes in, I believe, through our RFP process. So that could be a future direction.
Then could that, rather than going to the hearing officer then, since that's a city employee, and I think they get paid for that too, don't they?
believe they do.
Then I think my request for that particular one would be to have the city manager chat with staff internally and just come to their own conclusions on if they think that should be a Tempe resident or preference towards a Tempe resident or whatever, or if they think it's going to
I'm
work
fine with
fine
that.
the way it is.
And then for the Joint Review Committee, I believe that's an IGA or some sort of an agreement with
It's an idea we
ASU.
have with ASU.
And so I think both of our Tempe members right now are Tempe residents, but I don't know that it's included in
We
the
appoint them,
underlying
but they're not
agreement.
required to be.
Right, I don't know if it's in
Okay.
the underlying agreement with ASU.
Okay, so I think we're all in agreement. Okay.
So just to wrap up direction, is the only commission that we were going back to ask about transportation, or are we
This transportation
And veterans.
in veterans?
and veterans.
For a percentage.
Yeah, or preference, or whatever they think.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you. All right, next is citywide housing strategies.
Need more housing.
That's actually exactly what it says.
But it also says how much we have,
On top of each other.
affordability-wise, which I thought was interesting.
They have to look around.
More houses.
People,
There's a lot of affordability.
exactly, that's what it says, which I was like, whoa. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am Paul Bentley, Deputy Human Services Director for the City of Tempe. I'm joined with Ryan Levesque, Deputy Community Development Director, and Scott Powell, our Economic Development Program Manager. Our purpose this evening is to provide an update on the Affordable Housing Continuum Action Plan and to seek council direction on a revised affordable housing naming convention, as well as future housing strategies approach. During the 2016 council retreat, staff received direction from council to pursue 5 affordable housing initiatives. These initiatives include adopting a standard affordable housing naming convention, completing a housing inventory, developing a housing affordability matrix, researching affordable housing frameworks and models, and implementing an affordable housing impact statement. This evening, we will provide an update on each of these 5 initiatives, and we believe the information detailed in the council packet and presented this evening will assist our 3 departments as we move forward, as we move in the future with our decision making, as well as assist with some specific city manager work groups. Those including the workforce housing work group, day worker work group, tiny houses, gentrification, and housing first. The first initiative that we'll discuss this evening is the adopting a standard affordable housing naming convention. Approximately a year ago, we presented a naming convention to assist in clarifying housing-related discussions. This nomenclature was based on household income levels, and our understanding of the affordable housing literature and practices of the time. We created 4 specific groups: the subsidized housing group, workforce housing, market rate, and luxury housing. Each of these was defined by area and median income. And for the audience this evening, when we're speaking about the area of median income, we're specifically talking about, for the city of Tempe, a value of approximately $62,900. This is derived from a metropolitan statistical area in which Tempe is a part of, which is known as the Phoenix Mesa Scottsdale MSA. As our recommendation was supported and implemented, we learned that what was meant to add clarity instead created some confusion. Specifically, we found that our naming convention did not align with HUD's definition of affordable housing. To address this confusion and to align our naming convention with HUD's terminology, we are recommending some refinement. Specifically, we are proposing an updated naming convention in which subsidized housing is renamed as affordable housing, workforce housing remains the same, and what we described as market rate and luxury housing is condensed into one area known as market rate housing. We believe this update will reduce some of the confusion we have found when discussing affordable housing strategies with HUD and other partners. Our second initiative was completing a housing inventory. A year ago, one of the most significant gaps identified when speaking of housing options was our lack of knowledge of Tempe's ownership and rental stock. Council supported staff in conducting a recurring housing market analysis, and through a competitive process, BBC Research and Consulting was hired to perform this analysis. A copy of the final report is included in tonight's council packet. The final BBC report incorporates the 6 listed discussion items as shown on the slide. Specifically, it includes a demographic analysis, a housing market analysis, a review of home ownership market, the rental market, housing market gaps, and it also includes a comparison of cities: Boulder, Colorado, Durham, North Carolina, and Provo, Utah. These 3 peer cities were chosen based on their size and proximity to a major university. While the BBC report provides multiple significant findings, for this evening we want to place emphasis on this one component. Our major research question was, how many housing units are there in the city of Tempe in each affordability range? And this chart provides us with those answers. In a review of this specific chart, what you see is the city of Tempe broken down by zip code and in total, and showing the number of units available based on household income. For instance, for home ownership, if you look at a 1-person household, there are approximately 412 homes available for those living within the 0 to 50 AMI. So this chart provides that information.
Councilor Granville?
Yeah, so I just want to correct one word. So the word available was a little bit confusing to me when I first heard it. Existing. Available is a very different thing. There can be 412 units, but you might never see one of them on an MLS.
That's very correct.
The other thing is...
Isn't it 412 up to 2,100?
Yeah, that's the second part of what I'm actually talking about. So the other one is where it says 3 people per household. If I remember correctly, that's 3 working people at that salary. So it would be like, it's not like a husband, a wife, and a kid. It is 3 working adults, is my understanding.
I believe it's actually the former, would be somebody working and 2 others. It doesn't delineate who's working and who's not. It's just that income hits that. Most of the standards usually 1 working person and then 2 juveniles, but it doesn't have to be that case.
Okay, I could have swore I saw it somewhere else in it, so I'll look. The reason I mentioned that is so for the, I don't know, I'm surprised you put in the 3. Because if you look on MLS or anything about something that you could rent or buy at 0 to 50 or 50 to 80, I think that when you work out the 30% income, it works out to like $80,000 home or something like that. So that's a 600 square foot studio. I'm not sure how you'd even put 3 people in it. So at the lower numbers, I don't know how relevant that 2158 number is, because it really is a 600 square foot studio.
Is
For
it?
one person, maybe.
Joel?
Well, yeah, a house is a house kind of thing, and affordability is affordability. And if you have 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, and it's $80,000, you know, and you have a family of 4,
Sure.
house
but
is a house.
I would just say while we're sitting here, just type into realtor.com and do a sort by cost. The first 10 places you're going to see are $140,000 or $150,000 or less, and they are roughly 600 square feet, roughly the size of this oval area we're in right now, right? And so you could do it, absolutely, and it's better than nothing, but you can understand why somebody might not choose to do it if they could drive into Mesa and not do it.
Well, there's a lot of factors, sure. Yeah.
And to Council Member Granville's point, he was very correct in that stating that that 412 number isn't available. You're correct. That is existing, and it's a very significant difference. Available meaning on the market and available for someone to purchase or rent as compared to just being in existence. Another component of the study was a comparison to peer cities. And so as the first chart provided a numerical value as to number of existing units based on household income, what this chart does is it provides a comparison to our peers selected in regards to the percentage of the housing stock that's available by household income. And so as a reference, looking at this chart specifically, looking at the first column under Tempe, Arizona, if you were to look at 0 to 50 AMI, about 1% of the housing stock that exists in the city of Tempe would be available for a one-person household at the 0 to 50 AMI. So that is how this chart is meant to be read and utilized for us in future decision making. And so the intent this evening is to present that the housing stock analysis has been completed. It is now available to our work groups and council and others to review, digest, and determine how best to put into practice. It is not value laden, meaning that it is a point for us to discuss from, but it does not at this time present a specific policy or philosophy to move forward with. It's to help in the development of those discussions moving forward. So in sum, this information plus the additional analysis in the BBC report provides us with factual context that can be used to inform the development of a housing strategy.
So I just, on that last chart, so basically from the Affordable Housing Naming Convention update, if you look at subsidized housing all the way up to workforce housing, 70%, 73% of our housing stock is affordable. Basically, if I'm looking at those numbers, because like, if you look at, you know, we're way, 73% is what Tempe is. Boulder is less than that. Durham, North Carolina is about 80%, and then Provo, Utah is about 72. So we're like right there. So that's basically, if you look at the 0 to 80 to the 120, which is basically the average affordable workforce sustainable housing, that is basically, we're at 73% of our housing stock is what we would classify as affordable.
If we're including the workforce group as well, yes, Mayor.
Joel?
Mayor, yeah, I'd like to first say, this is great.
This is really,
This is just great information. I know that this has been an issue that we've always been like talking about over and over, where we're at, or what do we need, but we never really had a real solid answer on what our stock was. So this is tremendous. You know, you kind of see the 0 to 50 areas where we do kind of lack in that area compared to the other cities that are being compared against us. But as we get from that zone, man, I tell you what, we are in the market, and it looks, you know, although it always comes down to what do you like, preference. You know, if a 2-bedroom in Tempe might be a different size 2-bedroom in Chandler, but what are you trading off? Or, you know, those kind of factors come in as preferential taste. But the fact is, there is affordability there. There is affordability that you can make do or have something or expand on something if you own something to even make it better. So anyways, the information I think was just right on. It was solid. It was great. And I just want to say thank you.
So in this next chart, as we talked about our 0 to 50 going all the way up to 250 and more, we talked about the area median income, but actually putting some numbers to it so you have an idea what somebody's upper income limit is that fits in with each of those categories. So within the affordable category, you see it broken down from 0 to 50 and 50 to 80. So 0 to 50 is where a lot of the housing assistance programs come in, which is why we delineated those two, although from my understanding there are some between 50 and 80 as well. But you can see what that upper income limit is for each of them. So for 0 to 50 for one person household, it's 0 to $22,050, where from 80 to 120 it'd be starting at 52, or would be from 35,250 to 52,920 is how in which you read that chart. So just providing a little context to the percentages that Paul showed you. And with that as well, the mayor just actually did the slide for me, but gives you the breakdown of each of them in a pretty color-coded chart of where you can see affordable from the 0 to 50, 50 to 80, and then the workforce as well. So this isn't cumulative. So looking at the percentage for ownership and the one-person household, where you see about 1% of our housing stock is, exist within that range. From 50 to 80, if you've got 80% AMI, you could afford less than 50%. So it'd be 14%. And then if you're 80 to 120, you can obviously go down as well. It takes you about 43%. If you sum up these, percentage that's available for rental between 80 and 120 going down is about 77%. So I think to the mayor's point, you do see a lot of affordability in there. Next slide. And then also with it as well is, I think some of the genesis of this entire study was, can somebody in the trades, can an educator, can somebody in the service industry afford to live in Tempe? So the same color coding applies here. And you can see where they fit. So the light blue is the 0 to 50 AMI, the 50 to 80 is in green, and the 80 to 120 is in, I would call that yellow, or orange. So you can kind of get an idea of a different type of worker, regardless of whether it's one person or three person, how much they'd earn and where they fit within that chart, and vis-a-vis how much housing fits within that category within the city of Tempe. So moving on into the different affordable housing frameworks. So I think all of us are going to touch on a piece here. So I'll start us off with the low-income housing tax credits, also colloquially known as LIHTC. And this is a federal program, federal tax credit program, administered by the Arizona Department of Housing. Each state administers it at the state level. And you get a federal tax credit to help a developer on the equity side develop housing projects. So a couple LIHTC projects that have occurred in Tempe, Encore and Farmer, Gracie Village, the Apache Trails, ALS project, are all examples of LIHTC projects that have happened in Tempe. So to qualify for the tax credit, it's highly competitive. There's more demand than credits available. But the minimum threshold is for any development, at least 20% of the units that are created must have it, or 20% of the units must fit 50% of the AMI or less.
Another program we currently have is our zoning and building fee waiver program. Currently, this is available within the Apache Boulevard redevelopment area, where fee waivers are offered for workforce housing, which is the 80 to 120 AMI range, and it allows up to 50% reduction in those fees for both zoning and building permit fees. Now, currently, we don't have a program that administers what the policy and requirements are for that fee waiver. Currently, right now, we have the workforce housing program that's going to be looking at developing a more comprehensive understanding of how a project would implement and meet those fee reduction waivers. Other programs could include identifying what the total percentage of the units are, equating to the percentage of eligible fee waivers, and then evaluate that project as they come on board. Currently, right now, the range is up from 10 to 20% of the total housing units proposed.
And then as a reminder, another current program, or programs that are available through our housing authority, HUD-funded programs, we have our down payment assistance program, or CAMP, rental assistance. We also have land structure acquisition, a family self-sufficiency program, and emergency home repairs, just as examples of current programs that we have.
So an effort that's currently underway, which most of you are familiar with, we issued an RFQ for Urban Core Master Plan, TOD, and affordable housing strategy. Has come out in June. We've now are wrapping up that process to bring forward to you a consultant for a contract bid on that. That'll be on the September 28th City Council, regular council meeting. And what that'll do is address the core urban area, both the downtown, Apache Boulevard, Town Lake area, from basically 202 to the freeway, approximately Priest, Hardy, and to the eastern borders, and address and look at urban core master plan efforts, transportation overlay district, which is part of that urban core area, and then an overall affordable housing strategy. This effort will be focused both on the TOD update as well as a citywide effort on best practices we can utilize for affordable housing strategies. And I'll get into some of those elements at the later item specific to that RFQ response.
Additional program underway is the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing program, which is a HUD legal requirement. To comply with this requirement, Housing Services is expected to perform a comprehensive review of all major factors that impact the availability of and access to affordable housing. This includes a review of zoning codes and land availability. That information, as we create it and comprise it, will be shared.
So some of the strategies that could be considered as part of that affordable housing strategy effort in the downtown and urban core master plan effort, we could possibly look at expanding the additional development fee waivers that are eligible. Right now it's to a specific area, Apache Boulevard redevelopment area. Maybe that program could be expanded as part of the greater TOD or other areas of the city where affordable housing needs need to be met. Other examples cities have used are a density bonus program, whereby you can increase your density allowed under the zoning district and basically get additional percentage of units of that property, and requires them to then provide in a percentage of affordable housing as part of that development project. Housing Trust Fund is another program.
The Housing Trust Fund is not a new program. However, identifying sustainable funding sources is. And so we are continuing to look for those opportunities as we move forward.
Now, another element that we talked about as part of that council retreat was implementing an affordable housing impact statement. So as part of the RFQ response that we put out on the street was to specifically identify a need to develop a affordable housing impact statement. Typically what this tool is utilized is to evaluate the affordability of housing as it relates to how zoning development impacts change and how basically our city programs or ordinances and requirements affect the affordable housing needs of our housing stock. What we've specifically identified in the program itself is a specific list of cities that we've researched: Atlanta, New Orleans, Austin, San Diego. They all currently have AHIS programs right now. So we've included that as part of that corporation effort for have the consultant come back, evaluate those, and find out what best suits Tempe in terms of our land and benefits cost analysis and adopting basically a program. One other, sure.
So, I mean, we did bring that up in the retreat a year ago, and forgive me if I'm a little frustrated, but the AHIS program, it doesn't create affordable housing. It's a tool, and it's a tool that councils use to sort of assess where they're going when they make decisions about development, and they're able to see if this development they're approving is furthering affordable housing goals or maybe keeping it stagnant or moving backwards. And it's essentially a tool and a helpful tool, not a public shaming tool, but one that could be helpful. So, I mean, we know that there are a number of cities trying this out. How long is the process going to be to start that up? Since we have the housing inventory now, why can't we just begin to use the AHIS tool as soon as possible?
It's certainly something we can consider. We've identified with the consulting effort kind of a time period to hopefully expedite that element of the process. We're hoping to get that done or wrapped up by the end of the year, so that way they can come back with some specific tools. In what you refer to, the sample forms is the example basically of the way to evaluate either private development or ordinances, programs that the cities are adopting to see how it does affect affordable housing.
No, I agree. It's just that, I mean, the affordable housing impact statement is out there. Cities are adopting them or not, and is there a way, how much study has to be done to see whether, I mean, is it just a matter of us having the political will to do it? Is it a matter, what is really holding us back? Why is it a 4-month process to evaluate the tool? And we've been evaluating it for a year. I just want to see it furthered and not just pushed off.
We can certainly consider that. Just we didn't want to pull that element out of the urban core because we know they were going to evaluate other affordable housing strategy efforts within this area.
I agree, but I thought the essential thing was to establish our housing inventory before we could do an affordable housing impact statement, we needed to know how much affordable housing was out in the marketplace. And now that we have that information, and I know I'm not a technical expert in this, so yield to your professionalism here, but it would just be good to have some sort of time frame, because this is a tool that we needed yesterday, and I think we need to get moving on it. I don't know how the rest of the council feels about this, but.
Well, Mayor, I think it's an ongoing issue, obviously, and I think to your point, yeah, sure, we needed it yesterday. We needed homeless issues yesterday. We needed a whole bunch of things yesterday. But the thing is that we're moving forward trying to establish, what we do need. It's not as if the issue's going away. The issue's going to always be there, and even if we come to the final conclusion, the issue's always going to be there. So I agree, but at the same time, I want to give some staff some ability to, and I think it's, at least I agree with you in terms of the urgency. Let's get on it, so to speak, but I want to let staff, tackle it at their pace if they can.
Councilor Granville?
Yeah, I think I appreciate what you say, Joel. I think there is a little more urgency than this, though, in this. And for example, we're going to be, we voted a while ago for the watermark, I think is what it's called, everything's by In-N-Out Burger. It's by the In-N-Out Burger right on the west side of this rural. And that's going to add potentially quite a few jobs, quite a few people, quite a few things. What I don't know, I have no idea, is how many of those people are going to want to live in Tempe, and how many of them are going to be looking for housing. And when they can't find the housing they want, what other kind of housing are they going to go to? And what is that ripple effect? So I don't know if the net increase on housing need for that complex will be 180 new units or 40 units, or because of the design of it, it'll have a positive impact. That would have helped in the decision-making process for me. Even if it starts off as a very rough sketch and over a period of 6 months or a year becomes a more refined process.
Excellent point.
Councilman Shapiro?
Thank you, Mayor. To Councilmember Granville's point, this is not, certainly things like watermark make this that much more important going forward. But even before watermark, we have more jobs than people in the city of Tempe. And so this is a uniquely important issue in our city compared to other communities that I don't think have probably ever had that problem and may not ever have that problem. And I call it a problem. It's a good problem to have, right? To have that level of economic development. It's a good challenge. But nonetheless, it's a challenge, and it's an urgent one, and it's one that predates some of those new development projects coming in.
Yes,
Well, I'm not entirely clear where we go on the AHIS thing, because to combine it include it in the urban core master plan, when I discussed this with some staff and some people in City Hall, they said, this is the low-hanging fruit. We can get this done relatively quickly. And I was also going to start a working group a year ago. They said, well, no, this is something we can do as part of the analysis of, once we have the housing stock analysis, we can just add this tool on, and this is something we can use as we approve development projects. So I asked my fellow council members, where do we go? Is this going to be part of the urban core master plan results, or is this a tool that we can use effectively sooner than that?
Councilman Granville, then Councilman Navarro.
So my preference would be, if you're amiable to this, is that we direct staff, look, start putting your best guesses in immediately, understanding that over a period of 3 to 6 months, what that paragraph or half paragraph or sentence might get refined and cleared up as you better get your hands around the kind of things that you should and shouldn't be putting in there. And we just know that for the first 3 to 6 months, you're going to put something in there, and it'll get better over time. And that way we don't have to wait for perfect. We can start doing good.
I agree with that.
My understanding is we're moving forward with implementing the Affordable Housing Impact Statement. That's what we want.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we're just looking for an interim thing until this can be up and running.
Because, this work, honestly, with the National League of Cities, identifying, reviewing cities, and that's information I gathered when I was going to do the working group. We know the cities that are doing it. We can reach out to the cities that are doing it. It's a best practice in a number of cities.
Councilman Navarro?
Yeah, and just to the point, we do have a work group on workforce housing. We are, in terms of the core and what we're doing in downtown, we are making those steps personally in trying to tackle the issues at hand. Maybe not Councilman Granville's point, we don't have the robust number. I think we're there. I think we're getting the direction of, hey, you got your best guess, and we're going to refine it even better. And I can live with that. And I know with the work group and with the council's understanding of, we still have a need with affordability. Hey, we're moving in the right direction.
So if it's with the council's direction, we could certainly bring that back earlier, whether it's October, November, and then report back kind of the status findings of it, but then still work with a consultant
Yes.
to refine and finalize that element.
Okay, we're good with that. And I think we're also good with the Affordable Housing Naming Convention that we talked about earlier. Okay.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I
Oh,
have
wait.
a comment. So a couple of comments. To me, the three most important things in here are the ones in the last, like, it's a hundreds of page document, and I thought the most important slides were actually the ones that weren't in your presentation and were the last 3 pages of our thing. So I would just direct staff or council to page 156 in our revised packet, figure 44. I was disappointed. I mean, I understand it's limited space, and God knows we've listened to too many hour-long presentations.
Page?
156, I'm sorry. Page 156, and it's figure 44. So what they did in this, and they did it in figure 44 on page 156, and they did it again on page 158 for buying instead of renting. And what they did is they said, look, how many people fall into this category and how many houses do we have for them? And when you look at the 0 to 30, we are 7,900 houses short, not based on what we want, but based on this is how many people live in the city in this income bracket, and this is how many houses we don't have for them. We are another 8,500, or 8,500 if you include people that are 50% below. And that's for rentals. And then if you go to page 40, or figure 45 and look at buying, it's much worse, right? Because what you're seeing there is the housing gaps are the ones that are in parentheses, 33%, 34%, 22%. The only people that can find all the houses they want in Tempe are people that make 128% and above of AMI. Everyone else, the housing stock isn't there. And again, keep in mind, that's the housing stock that exists, not the housing stock that is available. So if one person who makes 120 to 250 AMI decides they want to move into a smaller house because their kids moved out, they're now sucking up the already short housing stock at the bottom of that scale, right? Because they go from a 2,200 square foot place to a 1,200 square foot place. And now I can't even get that 1,200 square foot place because some rich person took it away. This, to me, I thought these were the two most important things because it showed that there's something like a 10,000 unit deficit in this lower end housing. And you think, okay, 10,000 units a lot, but let's just put that in perspective. That's the equivalent of every student who lives on campus. If you think of Manzanita, Palo Verde, Hassayampa, Sonora, you go down the list, there's like 8,500 to 9,000 students living in residence halls. You could build every residence hall in Tempe again at that lower rate, and you still wouldn't meet the existing need of people who currently live in Tempe who can't find a place, who don't match up with the number of places. That to me is a huge number. And then that led to another one, which unfortunately I didn't get, Elizabeth, we didn't get the information. Oh, can you pull that up? And so the question then is what that looks like. The chart they gave us in there only went back to 1980. Yeah, it is. If you could zoom in. The one they gave us only went back, I'm sorry, to 2005. And so I asked them to pull up some other ones. Can you zoom in?
Control plus.
Thank you. There we go. So if we zoom in on this, what you'll see here is from first off, from 1980 to 2015, the number of kids we have in our city has dropped by 10%. Like, so this idea that there are fewer kids in Tempe, it's just true, right? But here's the equally scary one. It's going to get better, not worse, I think. I could be wrong. Because if you look at the spread, for example, in 1990,
of the people that are 18 to 24 and 25 to 44, a lot of people stay in Tempe. That spread is 16%. But when you go to these later dates, it's a 3% spread. That means once you turn 24, you leave, right? Because before, 16% of the people were staying from 25 to 44. Now 3% of those people are staying. You're like, well, why is that number from 18 to 24 getting bigger? Well, it's getting bigger because ASU's added 10,000, 20,000 people or whatever, right? That's why their number, that's why the 18 to 24 number is going up. But as soon as you graduate, you leave, which is why that spread is only 3% now. And so what that's telling me is that is exactly a housing affordability issue. That means you graduate from ASU, and the vast majority of the people don't stay.
Or they don't have jobs for those people
Oh,
graduating.
but there are more jobs than people here.
Like I said, it depends on the type of workforce. It depends what the economy is.
Yeah, and can I, you know,
I mean,
there's-
not everybody, maybe the job they're seeking is somewhere else.
Well, along with that is
Yeah.
is the fact of what style of house do they want, where do they want, a whole bunch of other factors. You know, the funny thing is we had a ASU professor that has given 2 presentations, one at a coffee talk and one at a Hilo conference, and from every presentation at the Hilo conference, I got people from Milwaukee trying to steal him. And the fact is he brings the insight of where we were in the past, where we were in present, and where we're going in the future. And it's not just it has something to do with affordability, because the whole thing was about affordability and housing and everything like that, but it talks about the trends in buying, it talks about the trends in the buyer, it talks about the trends in the millennials, it talks about the trends in how people are using technology and how they think and what they want and where they want to live. That's why our urban core is expanding and getting bigger. That's why studio apartments are more attractive than maybe a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment for a single guy. You know, there's variables that come with that. So I wish the council could have this presentation, because it would actually get us to sit back and actually rationally think why and what we have. To that point, you know, we have a lot of people that are staying in their homes too, and they're not, you know, relinquishing their homes to families that could actually take them, to the point where I'm glad. Yeah, exactly. I'm glad you know, if my kids got out of the house, I want to downsize. Well, I'm going to downsize, and that house is going to be available. You know, so these factors, though, even when we think we have the perfect world, we might not have the perfect world. We might not have buyers that want to buy; they just still want to rent. So there seems to be more complexity than this, but I think that we are getting on the right track. I see the breakdown with the diagrams on our real affordability issues that we have to bring up to, and we're comparing ourselves to other cities, and cities our magnitude. And I think that, you know, with everything said, we are in the ballpark of what a city of this size should be, and we're trying to make it better. So,
To that point, if the council's okay with this.
I love the work.
Joel,
It's great work.
The professor you're talking about, was he the one you had at the police substation?
Yeah.
If council would be amenable to having him come present us what he did at a work study session.
I love that.
Because he's really good, and I caught the tail end of that Java with Joel series. But I would tell you, I think there's a lot to be said. A lot of it also has to do with, the professor mentioned was, Kobe, you talk about the people they're moving somewhere else. A lot of it has to do with, do we have the jobs that these people are seeking within our region? And that has a lot to do with it based on what I've read and so forth. I'm not discounting what you're saying, but there's a lot of factors.
It's a combination of both. I think
it's a combination of factors, and so the more opportunities we have for graduates to have an employment, whether it's in Tempe and somewhere within the valley and the ease of getting around, I think that would be helpful. So
I think, and again,
that's one of the biggest challenges we have is having the industry here.
Right. I would hate to ever say that causation and correlation are the same thing, that there's a single factor that's ever a silver bullet. That's overly simplistic. But the thing I would say is this, is that when you look at those 2 graphs I looked at, what they looked at was the number of people making that income and the number of places they could live in the city. And what it says is we've got a lot more people in a lower income and not the same number of homes. And so I think we've got 2 choices to make, or a combination of both choices to make. And that is raise the amount of housing that's in that lower level, the equivalent of all of the residence halls at ASU combined, in a perfect world, or start having conversations that when we attract a $120,000 a year employee, saying, look, that's now added residents that we're adding, and that's again going to shift that housing thing. And so the housing balance, right? And so it's like, I think we both have to look at providing housing for the low end and what we're doing about attracting at the high end.
And to your point, I think we do, but the fact is we can't do it for everybody. We can't do it for every business that comes into town and say, hey, we got the perfect size and everything for that person right here, because it comes down to it's probably not. Every business is going to have very low-end jobs. Do we have enough housing for those extreme low-end jobs, or do we have the great transportation system to get them in here? We'll have a combination. We're not going to satisfy the whole thing, is what I'm trying to say, but we have to have
Yeah,
a
no,
number.
no, that makes sense. But I think, by the way, I really appreciate this conversation. I think this is very helpful. But let's say, for example, somebody came to us and said, look, I've got dream thing, right? 50,000 jobs that pay $100,000 a year. I'm going to put them in Tempe.
Amazon.
Sure, we'll say Amazon for the sake of example, right? So I want all of these incentives or all these things. I mean, here's the crazy situation we're in. What would happen to our housing affordability if we added 50,000 people that made $100,000 a year? They wouldn't be able to fill up all the nice houses. Some of them would live down the 60. Some of them would stay in Tempe, and they would push all of those housing prices because of that stress. And it would affect the lowest income people who now are looking at a house and being like, look, it used to cost this, but now you got 50,000 more people trying to buy it. Now it's going to cost this. And so it exasperates the problem of a lack of low-income housing when we attract high-wage jobs. I would never say don't attract high-wage jobs, but I think we need to tie that to the housing so that those high-wage employees aren't creating these pressures on housing.
You're making some wild assumptions. I mean, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying, like, anyone could take any statistic and tilt it to how they want to make it work towards your presentation. I mean,
I've never met an economist with just one hand.
Mayor, to your point, I think, and what you said.
I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into it, and I can give you examples, but that's not why we're here. I mean, we're here to study it, but I'd love to have a conversation with you offline too, but there's more to it than just.
And I'd like to hear the presentation from Joel's guy as well.
I think that would spark a conversation that would be suited for you and for everybody here. I think we should wait for a conversation with that, and that will be great.
Okay.
So, in conclusion, this evening, our intention was to provide an update on the 5 initiatives that we discussed during the last year's council retreat. And I believe we heard that there is council direction on accepting the updated naming convention. We reviewed a little bit, a small section of the housing inventory, which is intended to do just this, which is to add dialogue and conversation moving forward. We reviewed the updated housing affordability matrix that is still available and in use for us to make decisions with. And then we will continue to research affordable housing framework models and frameworks, as well as we received more direction in regards to the affordable housing impact statement.
Mostly people aging in place.
Does that sound good, everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next is Urban Forestry Master Plan. We have Bonnie and Tony. I think, who else is coming up?
1,000 people.
Braden?
Here, 6,000 people off the stage. Okay.
You guys leaving? Okay.
Talk amongst yourselves.
Want us to start?
Yes, please do.
Mayor, Council, Tony Miano, Deputy Public Works Director for Field Operations. I have with me tonight Bonnie Richardson, who's our Public Works Principal Planner. And I also have Braden Kay, our Sustainability Project Manager. Tonight, we're here to present Phase 3 of the Urban Forestry Master Plan. This is not a budget request, as we will follow the normal process. This presentation is to describe our actions that we have in a management plan that supports council performance measures 4.11. That calls for a metrics of 25 trees per acre on city-owned land, I also would like to just clarify that when we speak about living infrastructure, we're not just speaking about trees. It's trees, shrubs, bushes, irrigation, controllers, and so it's so when we put that in context and we talk about that, I just want to make sure that everyone understands that portion. We've been spending most of our funding right now on irrigation and controllers. We're repairing a lot of our deferred asset management, so trying to go in and get our trees watered properly and our living infrastructure watered properly is one of our main goals. So I just wanted to make sure that we take care of our trees now, so in the future we're not replacing them in a short time. So with that, I will hand it over to
Thanks. Good evening. Happy to be here to talk about our urban forest master plan. So as you can see, council priority number 3 for enhancing the quality of life is one of our goals, and the performance measure is achieve a rating of very satisfied or satisfied with the quality of our parks and recreation. Also, council priority number 4, implementing sustainable growth and development strategies. And in that arena, I've been working with Braden also. And the performance measure is to achieve a tree coverage of 25 trees per acre on average on city-owned property. So I'm going to explain a little bit what that means. We're here to present the final draft and hope to bring it, come back to you with a request for approval of the plan. The presentation today includes the guiding principles, public outreach, and then our strategy for how we go about executing this master plan. We also are intending to develop the plan to implement the strategic, economic, environmental, and quality of life values that are indicated in the General Plan 2040. So when we started talking with people, staff, outreach, we developed these guiding principles so that we were sure we weren't missing one area or another. Some of these, I'm not going to read them all, but some of them, cultivate collective action has always been important in Tempe, and we're finding that a lot of people want to join us and help plant trees. Using our resources wisely, we're careful about how we're using water, and also the idea of the right tree in the right place, where you see some of our trees that are either declining or dead. It can be a case of not planting the right tree. You also see that in some creative pruning under wires. So we had quite a bit of outreach. You can see the different events that we had starting back in 2015. We've had Tour de Trees. Tempe is now becoming known as a place where you can participate in tree activities. And then I'll also mention we've had quite a few presentations to boards and commissions. So a lot of people have seen this. I think most of them heartily support it. And do you want to go to the next slide, please? So to date, we've jump-started the idea of a plan, an urban forestry plan, by attaining some grants and doing research. Coming up October 28th is American Forest Community Relief Grant. So for that, we have $65,000 in funding. Plus, we're doubling up with getting an additional grant from Urban Offsets, ASU, and Duke, and that relates to the carbon offset program. We'll be planting 150 trees in Rio Salado Park on the edge, the southern edge of the art park. And that's a good example. That's a grant, one of the larger grants, and with that we have the funding to provide proper irrigation, proper maintenance. Some of the smaller grants, it's a different situation. So with ASU, Urban Offsets, and Duke, we may get $50 to $100 per tree, but that does not include irrigation. So what we've done is start out where either we have flood irrigated parks, we have existing irrigation that we can do modest extensions on, and then we also looked at the equity piece so that we're getting trees where parks may not have so many. Finally, Tempe Rotary Clubs have offered to fund 100 trees in Spab Park. That's under a mandate, or I guess I'd say challenge, that internationally the clubs are attempting to plant 1 tree for each member of Rotary. We will have volunteers out working on that as well for planting. Okay? This is one of the more important slides because it really talks to our strategy about how we accomplish an urban forest on our own city properties and how we encourage others to participate so that the broader part of Tempe becomes more shaded and cooler and has the benefits of the canopy. So in the center, you see we're starting in our public spaces, obviously the streets, parks and open space, and on our facilities as well. As we outreach and we get to that private-public engagement, the first thing we'd like to do is provide some education so citizens know how to properly plant a tree. If they're interested, they can get together. We have 4 different groups in neighborhoods now this year receiving Marianne Quarter grants. So we're getting much more interest in that. Properly adding some training opportunities as well as just disseminating information people can use. Collaboration, we've seen a lot of opportunities here. Bank of America will be collaborating on our planting in the art park, but we also get student groups, other organizations. And then implementation is really, would be at that point launching some community-based tree planting that might be in front yards so that they're shading sidewalks and bike lanes along where we have schools. So that's the larger reach for the program. But right now, we are starting our focus in parks. So this gives you an idea about some of the education. If we can explain to people that healthy behaviors coupled with your surroundings gets you 70% of the way toward good health. We've educated the community towards reducing healthcare costs, increasing pedestrian and bike activity, and also cleaning up the environment. The diagram on the right is helpful for understanding how we can expand shade to maximize urban cooling. So you're getting not just the tree shade, but also if we're combining how we plant trees, it lasts longer, your cooling distance extends, and lasts longer through the day. Education is also about what's happening in our region. This slide shows just Tempe, but this heat island map is actually provided by Arizona Forestry. It's an interactive map on the web, and wherever you've got the darker red or orange colors, you have areas where you should be focusing some of your planting. How we do, yeah.
I'm going to ask, it's hard to look at, so I see Guadalupe and the
Yes.
red in Guadalupe. If you go up and just the sort of top quadrant, that reddish rectangle,
Yes.
do you know what neighborhood that is?
That's actually, you can see the curve.
Yeah.
So that's that's east of Rural and north of University. And again, there are some others you can see near Guadalupe as well. So your climate isn't going to stay just within our boundary. And we know that addressing some of these heat island areas is important. We've always known that along Rural, we have some heat island issues. It also happens at busy intersections. And some of it is due to being desert areas, so that we really haven't, it's not due to building, it's due to the desert not having many trees. So conducting training, again, we need staff training. We need to address local and regional issues, support grant projects, and perhaps provide some sort of center or online resource for citizens. In collaborations, and I think Tempe has already seen some participation and people interested in coming out for planting more trees. This was the Escare Park tree planting. This was the first planting with grant funding, and we planted 42 trees in that park, so it meets the 25% goal. And as we look at improving our trees, what?
So that ground was so hard.
Yeah. But we did have good irrigation opportunities. So our irrigation expense wasn't very large on that particular project. But what we'll be interested is seeing that over the next 5, 10, 15 years. The Urban Forestry Community Meeting and Tree Expo on the right, every time we've been out to talk with the public, we've tried to have a tree expo and get a lot of different experts there helping to educate the community and provide information. So implementation, like I said, we're starting with parks, but it also includes right-of-way, and I know I've been working with the forester for that, and you will be seeing a lot more trees in the right-of-way, and also transit projects and some of their street improvements. And the core of that coordination should be in the forestry program. So we began with inventorying trees. We have data on existing, declining, and trees that have been removed. We also are looking at flood irrigation and the benefits of that in our parks and for our trees, and then system irrigation, so that we know what we've got and where we've got it. Then we've started to rank and prioritize parks for tree planting. And like I said, we start out where we have new water infrastructure already existing. We don't have to spend a lot of money on that. Equitable locations, and then current parks improvement projects. So if we're already in a park doing some improvements, it makes sense to also do additional tree planting in those parks. The gaps are pretty well known. Sometimes the lack of trees is due to water systems not working. Some of it's just due to past development where people and businesses didn't have to plant trees. So we've got a lot of areas, these on the lower left are along Apache, where it's pretty difficult to walk very far or even wait for the bus. We've also got a lot of storm damage. So a lot of our existing budget is going towards just getting us back up from where we've been in the last several years, and also from the storm damage. And on that, I want to mention that we are looking at different ways to plant our trees to help prevent storm damage. So you'll be seeing some different protocols. This is the one that's actually about our investment in living infrastructure. So the ASU study showed that we have a current tree count on our city-owned properties of 19,450 trees. If we look at planting 750 trees a year to reach that 25% goal by 2040, you can see that the number of trees needed would be 16,000, roughly 850. Plus, we are looking at a minimum of 100 trees per year, just replacing those that have aged out of the system or are damaged. And we're finding actually that that number may be shy of what we really need. And thus far, we've planted, I think we've got 141 trees this year that have been replaced. We look at the cost to the benefit. So if you look at a 24-inch box tree, it's approximately $400 for that tree. And that does include new irrigation, staking, first-year care, fertilizer, and that kind of thing. So that's a first-year expense. After that, annual care is estimated about $68 a tree. But we want to talk also about annual community value of trees. And there it includes that cooling factor, being able to walk in your neighborhood, the beauty of the trees. And so we did hear from citizens at our outreach that they did want a community that had more trees.
Lauren?
Bonnie, so isn't the city looking at, in cooperation with the county, innovative ways of raising up those trees and innovative purchasing programs with the county?
We are looking at the Tall Pot program, which was started by the county, and with that, we can use desert trees and plant them in or near our desert areas. They're grown to have a longer tap root, much stronger tap root, and we can drill down and place those trees and just give them supplemental water for the first year. After that, they can then exist just on the natural rainfall water. So that reduces that need for irrigation on those trees.
If that program is enhanced with the county being perhaps a nursery for cities, would that potentially drive down the cost of the trees?
It could, but the county has decided that they aren't going to be a nursery.
Really?
So we are looking, there are some private sector areas where they're looking to grow trees in that way.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions on that one about value? Here's our timeline. Like I said, we started quite a while ago with this concept. And we're at the work study session. We'd like to come back on October 26th. So tonight what I'd be asking is if you have any comments, preferences, questions, anything you think in that initial master plan that needs to be changed or altered.
Looks good. Councilman Granville, then Councilman Cubey.
Yeah, so I'd say overall it looks great. It was clear a lot of time and effort was put into it, and I appreciate that. A couple of things I would add. Number one is I've always been amazed at the lack of tree canopies in parking structures for commercial complexes. And some of them I understand. Well, it's old, it was grandfathered in, it was built in the 60s or 70s. But even if you look at Tempe Marketplace, which is a beautiful place, if you want to park under a tree, it's not like there's a ton. And that's exactly where one of the places where the heat island effect comes from. And I know as a shopper, you see people drive, they're 100 yards away from the entrance because there's the one tree that's available. I would love to see you all at least look at, work with the chamber, work with whoever else, work with Ryan to see about maybe enhancing that requirement for new construction to, have people enhance their commercial properties for new builds only, of course.
And we've actually already started that. So, Ryan's still here. I think on some of those properties, they may be getting 33% coverage on some new development. So we are starting with this new approach across the city.
I think that would be great, yeah, to just sort of tell people, look, this is the new normal.
Yeah.
I think that would be great. The other one, and then obviously keeping up with code enforcement on it. I think we've all driven by parking lots where there's 100.
That's the biggest one.
There's 100 drip lines that don't go to anything. And it's like, look, it's not just about putting them in, it's about replacing them when they die.
And one approach with that was that we felt we had to kind of clean up our house.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Before we went out and started code enforcement. We've got some areas where we really need to plant a lot more trees.
And then the other one, I've got everything, is if you go back to the slide that says investment in living infrastructure, it had the pricing, the $400, $68. So, I've cited, Don didn't know he was going to get so often cited when he said this to me, and that is that I said, oh, we should do this, and his comment was always, well, what are you trying to do? Well, we're trying to conserve water. Okay, let me tell you the cheapest way to conserve water. And so while I like the idea of the city property being 25% shade canopy, I know there's also a goal of citywide being 25% shade canopy. The goal is to have shade canopy, right? That's the goal, not a specific way to do it. And so when you look at this chart, what it tells me is for $400 to start and for $68 a year for, I think, ever, we can have an additional tree. But what we don't have is, so I just went out and dropped $2,500 on trees because I put in 6 trees in my house and sent Lauren photos.
It was kind of creepy.
Yeah, and the city didn't pay me anything. Like, you guys are indifferent to my 6 trees and my $2,500.
Oh, I'm not.
No, I know you're not, but you know what I mean. Like fee-wise, you are. And so it would seem to me if the goal is to add trees, then what we're really trying to do is make that $40 number as small as possible to us for every tree we add, and to make that $68 number as small as possible to us for every tree we can add.
100.
Yeah, 468 to maintain. So let me tell you what my trees cost the city. No money and no $68. And you got the benefit of it, right? And so I think the thing I would say is if we can get the same number of trees by doing like a $50 or $100 rebate, because now you're only out $100 to get another tree by paying me a rebate, not me, because I've already put my trees in, and you're not in the $68 for maintenance, you've gotten a lot more bang for your buck, potentially 4 times as much, plus every single year you're not doing maintenance. And so I would say in addition to doing this, or maybe come up with some 80-20 split, 60-40 split, let's talk about the cheapest way for each next tree. And I think the cheapest way is to encourage residents to put in and take care of their own trees.
Sure.
What happens if they don't do it? So it goes back to the code enforcement issue.
Well, I mean, they could let their tree die. Like, I might not water my tree and kill it.
I mean, yeah, but then it defeats the whole purpose of what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And I think that plays a part in the education piece.
Right.
If we can go out and educate people and give them a little bit of an incentive to plant, that's all the better.
So for example, if you were to pay me $400 to put in a tree and it was free to me, I would probably not treat it like it was worth anything because it didn't cost anything. But if I paid $250 for that tree, I'm not going to drop $250 for something that I'm not going to maintain. And yet the city for $150 has now gotten a new tree put in. And will never have to pay to maintain it.
Joel?
Lauren's first.
Oh, Lauren.
So, yeah, I think Councilmember Granville, that is a great idea to add to our rebate programs and incentivize.
Do it toilets.
Yeah, we do. The total is the
Right.
best. And again, I feel like I'm the Cassandra or the Debbie Downer tonight, but David Hondula, who is a climatologist at ASU, often talks about this in the urban future scenario meetings he has. But imagine this scenario: 2040, we'll have 45 days where temperatures exceed 120 degrees in this area.
Joel,
And that is-
Angel's face.
So, I mean, we're here dealing with finite issues all the time. We're developments. We're not necessarily, we're reactive. As a council, we have to be. Staff is reactive. We need to deal with emergencies that are in front of us. But this is a looming crisis. And the old Chinese proverb that the best time to plant a tree was 7 years ago, it's, continually hitting my outer cortex, inner cortex, I'm not sure which. But we really need to get started. And I know we're doing a lot of planting now, but we really have to ramp it up. And Bonnie, you've done a masterful job doing this program. Just all the engagement, I've been to many of them. Just I commend you so highly for all the work and partnerships you've built out. And you've gotten so many grants, seed grants, and tremendous amount of grants, tremendous. But it's time that Tempe put more skin in the game, because we're talking about pretty dire drought and heat that's already impacting us. We saw that this summer. Everyone's head almost exploded because we had one day with 120-degree temperature, and there were economic impacts to that too. So it's just a wise expenditure, and I think the value of the trees is only going to go up in future years. So I say all this because we're all for the Urban Forest Master Plan. I assume we all are for it, but when push comes to shove, we need to implement it too. And one of the chief recommendations in there is to have an urban forester for the city of Tempe. Many cities have this role enshrined in their staff. There's in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, my brother-in-law was the tree warden of Chapel Hill, and his responsibility was every single tree in that city, and working with many, many volunteer groups. And we know we have people very well trained across the city in different departments who are arborists, who have arborist training, but we don't have that one person who's sole job it is to maintain the health of our tree canopy. And I don't know, I know we're going to be waiting till the next budget year, which I think is a mistake to delay, 10 months to really implement this master plan when we've developed it over the course of years. So with your permission, I would like to start, I don't know if it's starting a group, or I would like to apply for some innovation funding to look at a 1-year, pardon?
That's not the intent of the Innovation Fund.
No, it is. It's supposed to be a 1-year, it's something to start. Well, I was the one that initially came up with Innovation Fund, so I could argue the case that you could maybe fund, and there's certainly some innovation that could be applied to this project, or it could be
One of the things I think is,
and I would like to work on that.
one of the things I think is, I think we all agree, I mean, this is great. Everyone knows the work that you've done, with Braden, with Tony and our staff. And I think it's important, and the rebate program is an idea I think it's worth exploring. I think it's something that's good. And I don't disagree with what Lauren's saying. The caveat is, we had this topic, and I agree we need to do something, but we also can't budget off of, we all agreed as a council to retreat about budgeting from the dais, that we have a process, and I think we need to stick to that process. With that being said, if there's opportunities where you can find additional funds to do certain things, bring it back to the council, we can figure that out. But I don't want to budget, and the whole council unanimously agreed at the retreat that we would not do one-off budgeting from the dais. And I just want to make sure that we do have a process in place in how we do this. I'm not saying, we're getting ready to put the 2018-19 budget together, and that's some of the things that I think we need to focus on. And
as a reminder, I mean, just to clarify, we talked about, let's say we look at urban forest, or we said that innovation funding couldn't be used for the second year of that person's role. I mean, you have to fund it to seed start it. It could be a 1-year position. It won't be funded further, but we need to show some element of partnership, some element of other funds coming in to help support that. But that certainly was not precluded. We never said you could not have any staff position or temporary position.
that's something that,
It was a 1-year, one-off
when
supplement.
we talk about the Innovation Fund, that's something that you list everything that we can't, I mean, the Innovation Fund is, the whole council will decide on that, and that's for a future date. I mean,
Well, Mayor, to that point, I mean, tonight with 3 innovation funds you brought up to fund out of the Innovation Fund. And the reality of the Innovation Fund was, in my vision, was not to be just a raid and fund this. It was for innovative things, not to have staff bring up stuff and issues that we were going to vote on and agree on, but innovative issues from people. So that's my disconnect with that. To the point that the presentation was great. I mean, everything you guys is right on. I think the council, I would assume, can agree to that. One thing I just wanted to bring up is working with the schools, possibly on that, because they have a mass variety of real estate, so to speak. I use Fees and Rover School because I live in that neighborhood, and it probably has the least amount of trees on that property. So I think that I remember back in the day when we were kids and they had Arbor Day, and families would donate a tree and stuff, and I still see some of those trees out there. I don't know where it's at now, but that's a big opportunity that we need to really address.
And I do think that's a great start and a focus. And again, it kind of takes a little more coordination of that. I find that most of our elementary schools, we have that walk to school program, and what gets kids walking is having shade on the sidewalk. So if we could get the schools to at least plant closer to the sidewalk too.
And just one other thing, I know you're going to work on the right-of-ways, and that was one of the maybe passions and stuff, and the coordination of trees, and coordination of streetscape. Every street has a different vision, so to speak, and using the right tree and not planting under wires, knowing that SRP or APS is going to cut them off in half and things like that. So I think this is great. I think it's great for our parks. We talked about Tempe Sports Complex, how parents like to sit on the berm, though there's no shade there either. So it's logical that we have these trees in those specific areas. So thank you.
Lauren?
And so, it's not just the urban forestry agent that would be in it, that could be innovative. There are a lot of the project that you mentioned, or the incentive program could be, or there could be a bus
That
stop.
could just be a flyer and a website, and we could be up and running in a day.
There's the bus stop, adopting a bus stop, shading a bus stop, or a business who has economic interest in driving more customers to their store might be willing to subsidize the cost of planting and maintaining a tree if it means that there's shade at the bus stop where client or their customers are waiting, for the bus. So, I mean, there's a number of possible innovative ways that we can help with the master plan, and I'll bring it back as a working group, I suppose, or as a possible innovation idea. But to close your mind and say, like, there's no way innovation funding can be used to progress the master plan. I would ask you just to open keep your mind open a little bit, because there are a lot of innovative
to that
ideas
point,
you can do.
Can I just interject real quick? No one's discounting any of that. So I know staff is coming back regarding the innovation funds, and we're going to have that conversation regarding innovation funds, and that's the time to have that discussion. What we're looking at tonight is we're going to move forward and adopt what Bonnie and staff has put together regarding the tree canopy and the urban forestry plan. That's what we're looking at right now. We can have the innovation discussion when staff comes back with the innovation, and I'm sure everyone's going to have their list of innovation ideas, and that's going to be the discussion at that time and
The point I'm
place.
making is that we're all for urban tree and shade. We're all for increasing our tree canopy until you get to the implementation phase, and then people say, well,
I think
cost.
we are implementing it, and we've with the
Right,
great
right.
work of our staff.
Right.
It
We're
could be
gonna
more
delay it
at
by
the next
10
phase.
months.
It could be more. We could get more when innovation funds come back, that criteria, and we have a discussion as a council. That's another time and place to have it. I don't know when it's coming back. I'd look to Andrew. It's coming back. I just don't know when.
For adoption?
No, this is
No.
the
The innovation. So what we're looking at before us tonight, and I agree with everything that's been said, it's all important. You're right, the implementation. We are going to have that discussion regarding the innovation funds, but we also had a discussion as a council regarding budgeting and how we move forward with that. And that's where we have the opportunity with innovation funds to see if the council agrees to do A, B, C, or D, or E, or F. It depends on what issue it may be that would relate to the innovation funds. And if you want to bring it up, then Councilor Kiwi, that's the time to bring it up. And I would encourage you to do that.
Mayor?
Yes, David.
Yeah, Mayor, I would just like to say, I mean, my understanding from the retreat was, I think we did say we wouldn't budget from the dais, but I think that was sort of the purpose of the innovation fund was if ideas or things come up throughout the year that are not sort of at the right time for the budget cycle, that we would, talk about that as a priority, and then staff might come back to us with some recommendations. So, I mean, at this stage, I would say, I'm in favor of staff coming back to us with some ideas about urban forestry, and if they have some, innovative ideas of things that we can do that there's some benefit to doing more urgently than waiting for the next budget cycle, then I would love to hear some of those ideas from staff. If they think it can wait for the next budget cycle, then it waits for the next budget cycle.
I agree with exactly what you just said, and that's why if they have something come forward, if Lauren has an idea, when we talk about the innovation funds, when it's scheduled on the agenda, that's the time to have that discussion. I encourage that. That's exactly what, I agree with what you said.
Mr. Mayor, just let me make it clear. The reason why I brought this up is, it's when you talk about approving urban forestry master plan, you sort of have to have a plan for implementation too, or at least discuss the implementation aspect of it. So, I understand what you're saying, but it's important that we not just give, approval without knowing that we're going to somehow really put teeth to this and put skin in the game, which we have not done until now.
But
really,
we're in the process of doing that, and when we come back with the innovation funds, we have that discussion. It's coming sooner rather than later. I'm sensing Andrew sees this, that we have that opportunity to have that discussion. And if there is an innovative way to come up with, to expedite some of the low-hanging fruit for the urban forestry, then that should be part of that discussion, along with everything else that the council's looking at regarding innovation funds. Right? That's the whole point. Are we good? We're good.
We're good?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you just send us in a Friday, sorry, Mayor, just in a Friday packet if other cities do tree rebates? I know we do zero-scaping rebates, but if you're just adding a tree in your yard, and if other cities pay people to do that or not.
Cities and utilities do it, but we'll put something together.
Yeah, I know like SRP and APS will give you 2 free trees if you go sit through their meeting for an hour. Yeah.
And that's very popular with our community, too.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any future agenda items any of the council members would like for a future issue review session? Seeing none, well, let's go. I think we could finish it. We could wrap this up fairly quickly. The next agenda item is a call to the audience for committee of the whole items. Members of the public have up to 3 minutes to discuss it. There are speakers cards at the back of the room. If you'd like to speak on one of these items, please get our attention and hand it to our city clerk. The first committee of the whole items. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address us on any of the committee of the whole items listed on this agenda? Seeing none, I'll close that portion. The next is items 4A1. It's a day worker program for council direction. I believe this is Councilmember Keating and Councilman Navarro and Vice Mayor Hernando Savage.
Correct. Thank you, Mayor. And I just want to talk a little bit about the Tempe Works pilot program that hopefully we'll get direction to implement tonight. First, before I start with that, I want to thank my council colleagues, Joel Navarro and Vice Mayor Hernando Savage, for their help in this program, as well as staff and our community partners, Corporate Job Bank and TCAA. Everyone's been fantastic, and this was one of those very complicated issues that could have gotten strung up and delayed, but if not for the great partnerships that we have here in the community, allowed it to move forward. So what this is it's a homeless day worker program that we're calling Tempe Works, and the Tempe Works Working Group aimed to build a program that not only offered employment services for homeless individuals in Tempe, but also provided wraparound services for program participants to increase their chances of remaining self-sufficient and obtaining housing. Our working group looked at all factors from Social Security benefits to medical coverage to housing and mental health. We considered the needs of the program participants would have starting out, such as uniforms, shoes, transportations to and from the job site. Staff evaluated these elements in partnerships with the City of Tempe and the Tempe Community Action Agency, which has contact with the city's homeless on every day and a deep understanding of what their needs are. We also engaged the private sector through Corporate Job Bank, one of the city's contracted staffing agencies. What we came up with was a true partnership between the city, TCAA, and Corporate Job Bank to build a program that looks at the whole picture and can be easily implemented and potentially expanded quickly if we so desire. So a few key points about the Tempe Works program is TCAA will identify and screen potential participants and refer those individuals for hire to Corporate Job Bank, who will then assign them to positions dedicated to the City of Tempe Public Works program. Corporate Job Bank will identify program participants to 2 to 4 designated positions within the city solid waste processing division, and potentially more as needed on an as-needed basis by Corporate Job Bank. So whenever there's city beautification projects or city beautification jobs that we have available to the city today that aren't getting staffed and aren't getting met, this would be an avenue for temporary staffing for those positions. So it has the potential here to create dozens of individual jobs for Tempe's homeless as we move throughout the year, the 2 years that I'm asking for. TCAA will work with individuals to provide uniforms and transportation to their job site, and they will also follow up with further case management, working with program participants to get medical care, Social Security benefits, among other services that they may qualify for. Participants will be paid a living wage of $12 an hour to start, with the course, as more permanent jobs come available, that would go up once they were able to kind of graduate from the program, as it were. And it would be funded within the existing budgets of our solid waste department, so we wouldn't be asking for any additional funds to implement this program. Tempe Human Services staff also identified funding from the Community Development Block Grants, which can be used to temporary house participants until Section 8 vouchers and housing can be secured. So what we came up with is a truly comprehensive pilot program that works across public, private, and nonprofit sectors to address the homeless crisis in the city of Tempe as well as the valley as a whole. This is the first of its program in the state that not only offers employment, but takes a holistic approach to helping our homeless population. Most importantly, this is a community-based effort to address a problem that impacts our entire region. So I would like to request council approval to move forward with the proposed Tempe Works pilot program in partnership with Tempe Community Action Agency and Corporate Job Bank. The agreement drafted by the Tempe City Attorney in partnership with TCAA and Corporate Job Bank would come before this council for consideration at a regular council meeting on September 28th, 2017.
Wow, that's awesome.
Thank you.
That's really awesome. Good job.
Very much.
Andy and Robin, that's really great. It's to see have that opportunity to work with some of the issues, the challenges that we face with some of the members of our community. I think this is a great opportunity for them to get involved and work with those organizations. That really helps define the city of Tempe, to be honest with you. So great job on that.
Thank you.
Council good with this? I think
Oh,
it's
yeah.
great.
No, 100%.
Okay. Yes, Lauren?
I want to say tremendous work. Councilmember Keating, I know this is a real passion of yours, and so I assume that the funding's been identified through, is it the Public Works budget?
Yes, the
Good.
Public Works budget right now has funding for the 2 to 4 potential jobs within the city of Tempe, but there's also other jobs that the city of Tempe goes to corporate job bank now for hire. And what we could do is get those homeless individuals into that pipeline so that those jobs they're already being paid for out of our budget.
Walking the talk. That's good.
Awesome.
Great work.
Thank you.
Great job.
I'm
All
excited
right.
for it.
So the direction is to go ahead and move forward with the working group pilot program?
Yep.
Sounds good.
Right on.
All right, next, new items for council consideration. Live music on Mill. Mr. Navarro.
Yeah, Mayor, very simply, obviously, we have a real passion for live music in the downtown area, and we've been doing a number of things through the DTA to really enhance it, to really bring the vibe, and they've done a real great job in trying to secure money and secure venues, and a lot of work goes into it. We have also our continual walk of fame, so to speak, of plaques dedicated to people who have actually come out or played in the Tempe area and really made a difference in live music. And I think it's strategically, and I hope, walking around, you can talk to our community members, and there's a great value in the live music that we have here in Tempe and what we used to have way back when, and we really want to enhance it. Simply stated, I just want to work with our city and the DTA to look at new ideas, partnerships, better collaboration on enhancing the live music venues in and around Tempe, and just seeing if we could just find some better angles that we haven't looked at yet.
All right. Yes, Lauren.
So, Councilmember Navarro, I do have some concern. I mean, Mill Avenue used to be much more of a live music venue, but we now have the Tempe Center for the Arts, which is a live music venue, and I think Thursday through Saturday there's it's called Emerge. Edge. They have a happy hour, and they celebrate and promote and show local bands. And I know with our whole Tempe Arts Master Plan, we're looking at really building that up, spotlighting more, just redirecting a lot of our live music to TCA. And I'm a little bit worried about, taking away from the TCA. I'm kind of concerned about how that might impact that, because that is supposed to be our focus of our Arts Master Plan. And live music is become, we have a world-class facility at Tempe Center for the Arts, but not as many people know about it. On Mill Avenue, we tend to focus more on the college-age demographic, and Tempe Center for the Arts is more, I think, multi-age in its appeal and its audience. And they're kind of at the cusp at a certain tipping point now, and I worry about, obviously you should go and pursue this, but I worry about the impact on Tempe Center for the Arts.
So those exactly are the conversations that we want to start having, because there's collaborations, there's actually, in many cities, they work together, the venues work together to enhance the other venues. So all we're just trying to do is just really trying to dive into it really with the city and the DTA and the arts, the whole community, the whole lake area. It's not just we're segregating it. And this is not just a downtown thing. It could be other areas of the city too.
Will there be anybody associated with Tempe Center for the Arts as one of the stakeholders in the working group?
Why not? Why, that makes logical sense.
Great.
I'd like to work with you on this.
Perfect.
And then I think it'd be great, only because I hear Lauren's concern, and I really do understand that, because I remember when Tempe Marketplace opened up, they're like, oh, it's going to compete with Mill Avenue. There's enough room to have both in terms of retail shops on Mill, which we have, and retail shops at Tempe Marketplace. I think there's enough opportunities, and who's to say that part of this live music on Mill is not just, it's focused on Mill in the downtown, but we also have the arts in the park stuff too, where we could have different opportunities that you could correlate. Obviously, it would have to come back to the council, but there's other opportunities. I think promoting Tempe as a music hub is kind of what the cultural thing. I think there's an opportunity here and we'll be more than happy to bring it back. I'm excited about this. I think I agree with you though. We got to make sure that, and we are working to make sure that
100%.
entertainers also go to Tempe Center for the Arts. Councilman Granville?
I was just going to say, I think it's great. The worst thing that happens is, a few more bands start showing up, which we're desperately in need of. The issue, of course, is rents on Mill. And then for the places that, like Casa that can do it, it's the complexity of doing permits and things. So one of the things I would ask when you're looking at this is if you can at least investigate. What you find is up to you guys, but investigate the idea of doing permits on a series basis rather than on a individual basis. So if you're like, look, I'm going to do it every Friday for the year, assuming that you don't get complaints, assuming that issues don't come up, you apply once, you explain it once, and that might get you, 10 Fridays or something. Thank you.
So direction to move forward? Okay. Next is volleyball courts on the north side of Tempe Town Lake. Councilman Navarro.
So, yeah, once again, Mayor, obviously, this issue has come up years ago. I tried to bring it up then, and probably not the best time with the downfall. But we have volleyball courts that exist on the north side of the lake. Really, the needs is more lighting and then potentially more volleyball. The reason why is we're starting to see an increase in volleyball sand courts in the high schools with the sports. There's really the population, the density, and what we have within the downtown area, the location of the potential of if we have enough courts, what tournaments and impact that can bring into the community. So basically, I just want to look at with staff on the viability of increasing the courts, increasing lighting, trying to see if this would implement the lake plan, the 2040 plan, just as part of the added extra venues that we do within the Tempe Town Lake area and the opportunities that it could bring in.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fine moving forward. Make sure that we have at least 2 people on these groups. That's what we talked about at a retreat. But one question I'd have for staff, maybe you could find this out with the work group. Of the volleyball courts we currently have, are they in high demand? Is there a waiting list? Are they meeting the demands that we have now? Because I do know we have some at Kiwanis Park and some other parks with the sand. I even think we have one at Meyer now, one of the parks. I could be completely wrong, but is there a demand? Is there a shortage that we're hearing, or is this something different?
This is, that's why I want to investigate. I want to investigate first off what the needs are, because we're the high schools and the colleges and ASU they have their own sand women's and they're, I believe, going in the men's volleyball teams, but it's kind of a combination of the proximity of ASU, our downtown area, the density, and the venues starting to come out, are starting to be more prevalent in the high schools. So the demand obviously seems to have an increase. So it needs investigation. So this is just, in my opinion, it might not be a lot of staff time, but it's just more of an investigation on the potentials of why the needs of increasing sand and lighting over there at that facility.
Colby?
Mayor, to your point of having 2 people on a committee, I have a passing interest in this. So if it's okay with you, I'll join on, but I'll take my lead from you on what we're talking about.
Perfect.
Okay. I would move forward with a working. Okay, sounds good. Next item is items in progress. As you guys note, the items on this agenda that are marked with an asterisk have a 90-day written updates that will allow us to provide to include in additional packets or indicated. Our council member may also choose to give a verbal update. And this is this section of the agenda that we've talked about at the retreat. So, Councilman Navarro, you could provide us with an update on Burchett Park?
Yeah, Mayor. Approximately a week or 2 ago, we had a discussion with city staff and architectural design. Help me, Don. Jane, he's talking. Excuse me, I blanked him. But anyways, they did a great presentation on just the idea of what Burchett Park is, some of the constraints, some of the possibilities, and then with the light or with the streetcar coming in, the added benefits of tackling it now than down the road because of what's going to be torn up within that area. This is an issue that obviously is just a kickstart of the idea, kickstart of what this park's potential and increasing the potential could do. It's really a community conversation, especially within the neighborhood, to really kind of have a real serious talk about the viability of Burchett Park and how it can enhance our entryway and ASU's entryway into our downtown area and the possibilities that could go along with it. So the presentation and some of the architectural designs that were brought up just to stir your creative juices, so to speak, on what more can be done in that area and how we can expand it or not expand it. I think it's a great start. I think staff is really engaged in the idea, and especially is very timely with the streetcar coming in. And we're just now going to proceed with the neighborhood reach outs and try to see what comes up from there.
Okay. Everybody go with that? The only thing is it going to compete in the budget process with all the other CIP?
So, obviously, we're very cognitive of parks and lines jumping and a whole bunch of other stuff. So those discussions and those monies are being discussed, and we have some ideas.
Okay, look forward to hearing it. Next is dementia-friendly city.
Oh, wait,
This is,
are you going in order?
yeah, I have some, yeah.
I had something for 6, but.
Yeah, we're going to come back.
Go ahead.
That's under the rest of the ones. I have some that, there's a couple there's tiny houses, there's OPA. You should have it on your agenda. You can discuss it in a second. Dementia-friendly city, while I'm still working on this, I can close this out. I can give updates. I'm still working with staff just to get the status of dementia-friendly, and if something needs further direction, I can come back, but I can close this section out. And I want to thank, or at least a working group, just knowing that I'm going to still be working on the designation with staff, and then if there's anything that affects the city, obviously we bring it back to the city.
Mayor, I just want to applaud you on this. You brought this up 3-4 years ago now, and it's come really full circle to being designated a dementia-friendly city, to having incorporated into our literature, to have it, it permeates everything we do now. So it went from really nothing to being a established program in just a few years. So kudos to you, and of course all the staff that makes the vision become fact, right?
Then just to add on to that, being Phoenix Fire EMS and medical community, it's always mentioned how Tempe's got the dementia-friendly, and it's always mentioned on what you and your dad and getting this thing in the right place. But it's known, it's well known, and it is kudos.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Okay, if there's something, if we need further council direction, I'll bring it back. But we could close the working group out, but just know that we're still working on it. Thank you. You can, Lauren, do you have something you want to update on any of the council, any of the working groups that you have?
Sure. And Mark, I salute you too. I know your heart and soul has been in that project, and I've gone to a number of the events, and they're just packed to the gills, which just shows the need in the community. So thank you. Yeah, about the contractors checklist, Councilmember Shapiro and I have identified what we think is sort of a low-hanging fruit. We know we have a severe shortage of workers. We have a building boom going on of sorts and a severe shortage of trained, skilled workers. So we're looking at, and we're going to discuss at our next working group meeting, establishing a career and technical education fair that's focused on the construction trades. And we'd invite apprenticeship programs that are approved by the state of Arizona to attend, and we would invite our high school students and community college students, and open to the community to interest those young people in the construction trades. So we don't know the exact details of that, and would hope to get that funded by some outside groups, but we'll be bringing that back probably by October 19th with our plans.
Great, that sounds good. Everybody good? Anyone else have any updates on any of the items in progress as a council? Tiny houses, anything? Lauren, you may have anything?
We had the RFP for the Humble Houses project, and I believe that RFP process is closed, and we're awaiting staff direction on the bids that have come in. So we'll be hearing about that, I guess, in executive session. And as far as accessory dwelling units,
Ask about, yeah.
Yeah, we had some additional public input that we wanted to incorporate into the in lots of comments, and so we're going to be meeting on that tomorrow, actually.
Okay.
And we'll be coming back to, I guess, October 19th with that.
That's what you're thinking, okay.
For sure, I hope. It's been delayed, but we really wanted to make sure we reached out to every manner of commission and neighbor and all that.
And if I could, Mayor, the reason I'm excited about that is because when you look at that bottom tier of our housing gap, those bottom two categories. An accessory dwelling unit could help fill some of those bottom two slots. So I mean, the sooner that moves forward, the better.
Oh, I agree.
Okay. Councilman Navarro?
Yeah, Mayor, just wanted to quickly update on the opioid programs. Obviously, we've been having discussions for the past year. It seems it goes by very quick. We've been engaging a variety of cities, county, state governor's office, sheriff's department, great conversations, finding out best practices throughout not just our community, but through other communities, and just trying to fine tune supportive direction to the state on where needs and funds need to go, in addition to try to establish a awareness campaign. We will be reaching out, and I hope you, Mayor, will be a part of this, to a public safety PSA, so to speak, video with all the other cities, just to support that the cities are fully aware and fully engaged in trying to tackle this problem. This epidemic obviously hits a variety of different families. It's not exclusive to any individual. And we're really doing some neat things. I have to give kudos out to our Tempe school districts. They are actually actively engaging their students with awareness programs and education on opioid addiction. They're using opportunities within the athletics to talk about the opioids as injuries arise, and try to have those kind of conversations within the classrooms. In addition, with Tempe St. Luke's, Tempe Fire, and our compressions only program that we do every semester, which is just an outstanding partnership with the schools and the city in saving lives. We're going to add a portion of it on opioid education, addictions, and where what solutions, what findings, and what help is out there, to really tackle it at the youth, so to speak, to really get ahead of this this epidemic. So the work is still in progress. We're going to reach out for another year and talk about the data. The data, we have real-time data coming in now from, and I have to give kudos to the governor on this. Nightline actually reached out to me, and they did a big report on the opioid epidemic here in Arizona and what we're doing to tackle it. But they gave kudos to the state that we were the only real-time, at the time, there's probably other states now, giving real-time information on Narcan use and how that has really shown where the epidemic's at. Right before that, we've been going on just the so-called brains rotten, still from China, death certificates on how many people died in certain areas from the coroner's office. Now we're just getting real-time information on people that are using, they're not dying, so to speak, but they have an addiction. So that's really increasing our awareness, and there's a lot of kudos out there. So still in progress, still in work.
But congratulations on this, Councilman Navarro, because I know you've led this here, but also at the National League of Cities level, and it's an issue that's seen nationwide, not just specific to the state of Arizona or the city of Tempe. So thank you for your leadership on that. It is important. I mean, obviously everybody's talking about it. So I just want to remind everyone, this is like the first time we're doing like the 90-day update for items in progress. That way we can, you could also either make a comment or you could submit something to us to read in the Friday packet. I think this is good as we move forward. Does anybody else have any other updates on any of the other items that are open in progress? Seeing none, I'll close that portion of our meeting. The only announcement I have is I know this Saturday we have a public meeting on our utility rates. I think it's going to be at, it's going to be at the Arizona Community Church regarding utility rates from 9:30 to 10:30, I believe. Yep, 9:30 to 10:30. I think that's just one of two open meetings that we're going to have regarding those rates. Mr. Manager, do you have any announcements?
No, Mayor.
Seeing none, we are adjourned.
Mayor, for the gentrification memo, I saw your change.